Greetings, lore masters. Tonight, our chronicle covers the ultimate destination, the final feast, and the golden promise that keeps every true Nord swinging their axe until the bitter end. We are walking the path of the dead, crossing the threshold of mortality to explore the 15 absolute truths of Sovngarde and its crown jewel, the Hall of Valor. The concept of an afterlife is usually a vague, misty comfort in most cultures, but for the children of the sky, it is a geographical certainty. It is a place of drinking, fighting, and singing, which sounds remarkably like a standard Tuesday in Windhelm, only with better lighting and fewer dark elves to complain about the noise. But let's be honest, considering the sheer number of things in Tamriel trying to kill you, from angry mudcrabs to gravity-defying giants, you probably wouldn't survive the trip to the afterlife without some serious enchanted gear or a very forgiving dungeon master. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment down below with your current location and the local time. I love seeing just how far our little guild of night owls stretches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind howls across the tundra, stripping the warmth from the bones of the fallen. But the Nord warrior does not feel the chill. The steel that pierced their chest has grown cold, and the frantic shouting of the battlefield, the clash of iron, the screams of the dying, the roar of magic fades into a dull, rhythmic thrumming, like a heartbeat slowing to a stop. For a terrifying second, there is nothing, just the void, the heavy, suffocating silence of non-existence. This is the moment where fear grips the hearts of the unworthy, where the milk drinkers of the world panic in the face of oblivion. But the true Nord knows better. They wait. And then the darkness tears open. It doesn't fade. It rips like a curtain pulled back by a giant hand, revealing a sky not of black, but of swirling, impossible nebulas. Purple, gold, and azure ribbons dance across a firmament that feels closer, heavier, and more alive than the sky over Nirn ever did. This is the Golden Hall's eternal promise. It is the first fact every Nord learns at their mother's knee, usually between lessons on how to properly skin a hawker and why you never trust an elf with your coin purse. The afterlife is not a spiritual state of being. It is a place. It is a physical territory with dirt, trees, waterfalls, and stone. The transition from the mundus, the mortal plane to Sovngarde is jarring because it is Sovengard. It's jarring because it is so incredibly tangible. The soul does not become a wisp of vapor. It retains the shape of the warrior in their prime. They look down at their hands and see calluses, scars, and the strength of muscle restored and perfected. The arthritis from those long winters in Dawnstar is gone. The knee arrow wound that ended an adventuring career is a distant memory. The promise is realized not in peace, but in vitality. To understand Sovngarde, one must understand the psychology of the Nord. They do not view death as an end, but as a transfer of station. The entire culture of Skyrim is engineered around this single destination. It dictates how they fight, how they govern, and tragically, how they die. When a bandit charges the Dragonborn with nothing but a fur loincloth and an iron dagger, we laugh at the AI. But within the lore, that bandit is making a calculated wager. He knows he's outmatched. He knows he's outmatched. He's out to be shouted into a ragdoll physics glitch. But he also knows that to die fleeing is to be denied the Hall. To die fighting, even against a demigod, is to punch a ticket to paradise. This belief system is the engine of the Nord way of life. It's why you rarely see Nords bargaining with death or seeking lichdom like those power-hungry wizards in the Imperial City. Why extend a miserable grey existence on Nirn when the Mead Hall is waiting? The Hall of Valor is the carrot on the stick, but it is a carrot made of roasted ox and eternal glory. This creates a society that is terrifyingly brave and occasionally spectacularly stupid. But there is a logic to it. The promise of the Hall is not unconditional. It is a contract. The terms are simple. Live with honor, die with a weapon in your hand or a fire in your heart, and Shor will welcome you. However, the facts of Sovngarde are often debated by scholars who have never been there, while the Nords simply know. One of the most interesting aspects of this realm is its exclusivity, which leads to a massive amount of friction in the academic circles of Tamriel. The core in-game fact that players encounter repeatedly is that Sovngarde is allegedly Nords only. We hear this from the lips of every Jarl and stable boy. Sovengard awaits me, they say, implying it doesn't await the Khajiit caravan guard or the Breton merchant. Yet, the lore is murkier than the water in the Riften Canal. This brings us to a significant point of contention within the community. The Ebony Warrior. We all remember him, the towering Redguard powerhouse, who has done everything, slain everyone, and simply wants a warrior's death so he can go to Sovengard. When you finally grant him his wish on that snowy mountainside, he gasps, "At last, Sovengard," as he dies. But does he get in? He's a Redguard. His pantheon has the far shores, a completely different afterlife. This sparks the passport debate among lore enthusiasts. Is entrance to the Hall of Valor genetic, based on race, or is it cultural, based on faith? Most evidence points to the latter. The Hall of Valor is Shor's domain, and Shor is the Nordic aspect of Lorkhan. If a soul dedicates itself to the tenets of the Nordic pantheon, living and dying by the code of Skyrim, the barriers of race seem to dissolve. The promise is for the true Nord, and perhaps Nord is a state of spirit rather than a bloodline. It's a comforting thought, really. It means that even if you were born in the swamps of Black Marsh, if you swing an axe hard enough and drink enough mead, Shor might just look down and say, "Close enough, come on in." But let's look closer at the landscape itself. When the soul first arrives, they are not immediately in the hall. They are in the valley. The visual design of Sovengard is deliberate. It is an idealized Skyrim. The trees are taller, the moss is greener, and the statues are monumental, carved from stone that seems to hum with magicka. But it is not a Garden of Eden where lions lay down with lambs. It is a dark twilight realm. It is perpetual night, illuminated only by the glorious, shifting auroras. This connects to an obscure piece of lore regarding the breath of kine. The Nords believe the auroras are the torches of the ancestors lighting the way. In Sovengard, you are standing inside the aurora. The very air is charged with the creatia of Aetherius. This environment serves a purpose. It is a filter. The promise of the Golden Hall is real, but you have to walk to get there. The afterlife still requires cardio. The path winds through a deep, shallowed valley, surrounded by statues of ancient kings who watch in stony silence. The atmosphere is thick with a sense of anticipation. It's the feeling of walking into a stadium before the game starts, or walking into a tavern when you hear your favourite song playing inside. We must also touch upon the physics of this place. In the game, we physically travel there via a portal at Skuldafnen, implying that a living body can exist there. This is a massive theological headache for the priests of Arche. If a living person enters Sovengard, do they age? Do they get hungry? The Dragonborn eats cheese wheels in the Hall of Valor, so presumably digestion is still a thing in the spirit realm. This grounds the eternal promise in a very Nordic materialism. They don't want to become beams of light, they want to eat, drink, and wrestle. The Hall offers an eternity of sensation. There is a darker side to this promise, however. The existence of Sovngard implies the existence of the alternative. If you fail the test of life, if you die a coward or live without honor, you don't go to hell in the Christian sense. You simply don't go to the hall. You might end up in the dream sleeve, recycled into a new life without your memories, or worse, snatched up by a Daedric prince if you were careless with your soul trading. The fear of not making it to Sovengard is perhaps stronger than the desire to get in. It's the fear of erasure. To be in the hall is to be remembered. To be outside is to be forgotten. And for a Nord, being forgotten is a fate worse than death. The architecture of the hall itself, which we see looming in the distance as we traverse the valley, is built from the bones of the earth. It is massive, defying structural engineering, held together by the will of Shor. It is said that the roof is made of shields, a nod to Valhalla of real-world mythology. But in the Elder Scrolls, it's more likely made of dragon scales and Stalrim. The Golden Hall is the anchor of the realm. It is the sun around which the souls orbit. We also have to acknowledge the soundscape, the Song of Sovengard, that booming baritone chant that plays when you enter the zone is diegetic. That means the characters hear it too. It's not just background music for the player. It is the constant thundering anthem of the realm, sung by the spirits themselves. Imagine spending eternity with a choir of burly men chanting in your ear. For some, that's paradise. For others, it might explain why earplugs were invented. The promise holds that once inside, all pain ceases. The fatigue of the long march through the valley lifts. The cold, which bites at the skin in the outer reaches of the realm, becomes a refreshing breeze. It is a psychological state of homecoming. Every Nord feels a magnetic pull toward this place. It's why the Draugr guard the barrows. They are preserving the bodies while the souls feast. Or perhaps, in the case of the unworthy, the Draugr are those who are denied entry, forced to linger in their rotting husks, jealous of those who crossed the bridge. The concept of the Golden Hall is etched into every piece of armour and Nord forges. It's in the toasts they make at weddings. May you die with a sword in your hand. To an outsider it sounds morbid. To a Nordsider it sounds morbid. To a Nord it's the most hopeful thing you can say. It acknowledges that life is hard, brutal and short, but the reward is eternal and tangible. It validates their suffering. The frozen toes, the goblin arrows, the dragon fire. It's all just the entry fee. And what an entry fee is. The journey we are about to take through this script mirrors the journey of the soul. We start here with the belief, the destination, the layout of the land. But as we will see, believing in the Hall and actually getting inside are two very different things. The Golden Hall's promise is written in stone, but the path to its door is paved with tests, trials, and one very large, very shirtless god blocking the way. As we stand at the edge of this spirit plane, looking out over the misty chasm, we realise that the Gnolls have figured out something the other races haven't. The High Elves want to unmake the world to return to divinity. The Imperials want to organise the world. The Nords just want to build a really nice house, fill it with friends, and lock the door against the cold. It's simple, it's primal. And it is arguably the most compelling afterlife in the entire Arbis. But a hall needs a host, and the host of this particular party is a figure shrouded in mystery, contradiction, and a history of being violently separated from his own heart. As we move forward, we must look to the empty seat at the head of the table. The promise of the hall is guaranteed, but the landlord is missing. Once you push past those heavy oak doors and the sensory overload of the feast hits you, the smell of roasting meat, the heat of the central fire, the roar of 1,000 conversations, your eyes are inevitably drawn to the far end of the hall. The architecture of the Hall of Valor is designed to pull your gaze toward the dais, toward the seat of power. It's the focal point of the entire afterlife. And it is conspicuously, glaringly empty. This brings us to the second, and perhaps most cosmically confusing, fact about Sovngarde. The landlord is never home. Shor's throne sits there, a massive construction of stone and bone draped in furs that probably belonged to beasts extinct since the Dawn era. It dominates the room, it commands respect, but no one sits in it. For a first-time visitor, especially one who just fought through a literal army of undead and a dragon priest to get here, this is a bit of a letdown. You expect the bearded patriarch, the warrior king of the gods, to be there raising a tankard in your honour. Instead, you get a vacant chair. Now, if you speak to the residents, specifically Ysgramar, who acts as the unofficial greeter and maitre d' of the afterlife, he gives you the company line. He tells you with great gravity that Shor's mien is too bright for mortal eyes. The implication is that if the god were to actually sit there while you, a living mortal, were in the room, your brain would likely melt out of your ears, or you'd simply vaporize into a pile of ash. Shor has politely excused himself to the backstage area to prevent the Dragonborn from suffering a catastrophic existential failure. It's a convenient excuse. It's the divine equivalent of he's in a meeting. But let's dig a little deeper into the lore here, because too bright for mortal eyes is a strange description for Shor. This is the Nordic aspect of Lorcan. He isn't usually associated with blinding light like Meridia or the Ager of the Sun. Shor is the god of the underworld, the trickster, the warrior. He is associated with the fox totem cunning, grounded and earthy. He is the god of mortality. So, why the sudden concern for our retinas? This empty throne represents the central paradox of Nordic theology, the missing god. Every culture in Tamriel has a version of this deity. To the High Elves, he is Lorcan, the reviled traitor who tricked the ancestors into becoming mortal, trapping them in this prison of flesh. They hate him. To the Imperials, he is Shezarrine, the spirit behind all human undertaking, largely watered down to fit into the 8 divines. But to the Nords, he is Shor. He is the champion. He is the one who said, "No, this world is worth dying for." And then he did exactly that. According to the monomyth, the elven gods ripped his heart out and shot it across the continent, landing, as we know, to form Red Mountain in Vardenfell. Physically, Shor is dead. He is the dead god. But in the Elder Scrolls universe, death for a god is more of a coma or a change in management style than an end to existence. He can't manifest on Nirn directly anymore, but here in Sovengard, this is his house, his rules. So the fact that he isn't in his chair is a massive point of discussion for lore scholars and late-night theory crafters. There is a prevalent fan theory, one that sits right at the heart of the Dragonborn identity crisis, which suggests a different reason for the empty chair. The theory posits that Shor isn't missing because he's too bright. He's missing because you are standing in the room. We have to talk about the concept of the Shezarrine. This is an obscure lore term found in texts like the Song of Pelennor, referring to avatars of the missing god who walk the earth in times of crisis. Throughout history, figures like Pelennor Whitestrake, Ismir Wolfhearth, and Tiber Septim have been suspected of being Shezarrine's mortal incarnations of Lorcan Shor. The Dragonborn is officially blessed by Akatosh. The Dragonborn is officially blessed by Akatosh, the dragon god of time, which gives them the dragon soul. But the Dragonborn acts an awful lot like a Nordic hero of old. You shout, you conquer, you save the world. If the Dragonborn is a Shezarrine essentially Shor in a mortal meat suit, then you cannot see Shor in the throne, because you are Shor. You can't sit in the chair and look at yourself at the same time. It's a metaphysical impossibility. When you walk into the Hall of Valor, the throne is empty because the king has returned. He just doesn't realize it yet. This adds a layer of profound irony to the entire endgame of Skyrim. You are fighting to save a realm that belongs to you, feasting with heroes who are singing songs about your previous incarnations. Of course, the Nords inside the hall don't seem to mind the absence. They don't look at the empty throne with sadness. They look at an empty throne with sadness. They look at it with reverence. To them, Shor's absence is a reminder of his sacrifice. He gave up his physical form so that the world could exist, and so that this afterlife could exist. The empty throne is a monument to the price of their existence. It's not a sign of abandonment. It's a sign of a job well done. Furthermore, we must consider the geopolitical, or rather, theo-political tension this throne represents. In the Imperial cult, the worship of Talos, who is a conflation of Tiber Septim, Wolfhearth, and Zurinarctus, effectively replaced the direct worship of Shor in many parts of the Empire. But in Sovengard, there is no Talos. You don't see a shrine to Tiber Septim, you see Shor's throne. This confirms that despite the imperialization of the Nordic pantheon over the last few eras, the old ways are the absolute truth in the afterlife. The Imperial Chantry can preach about the 9 divines all they want, but when a Nord dies, they don't go to Akatosh's library or Zenithar's workshop. They come to Shor's Mead Hall. The emptiness of the throne might even be a subtle rebuke to the Imperial Shor. Doesn't need to sit there to be in charge. His presence is the foundation of the reality itself. Visually, the throne is also a storytelling device. If Shor were sitting there, the game developers would have had to give him a model, a face, a voice, and that would ruin the mystique. By leaving the chair empty, they allow every player to project their own idea of the Father of Nords onto the seat. Is he a giant warrior with a braided beard? Is he a shifting spirit of wind and snow? Is he a fox? By remaining unseen, he remains omnipotent. There is also a fascinating, obscure tidbit regarding the totem beliefs of the ancient Atmorans. Before the Nords worshipped human-shaped gods, they worshipped animal totems: the hawk, kine, the wolf, Mara, the bear, Tsun, and the snake, Orki. Shor was the fox, If you look closely at the carvings around the hall and the throne, you see these animal motifs repeated. The throne is just a chair. It's a synthesis of the ancient Atmoran animism that birthed the Nord culture. The emptiness of the seat might also reflect the elusive nature of the fox totem, always moving, never pinned down, leading his enemies on a chase. Let's not forget the Heart of Lorkhan connection. We know from the events of the Elder Scrolls story Morrowind that Lorkhan's physical heart was bound to the mortal plane, used as a battery by the tribunal, and then eventually freed, or destroyed, depending on how you interpret the Nerevarines' actions. Some lore-masters argue that the destruction of the heart in the Third Era might have affected Shor's ability to manifest in the Fourth Era. Perhaps he is more dead now than he was in the past. The connection between his heart on Nirn and his spirit in Sovngarde is a tether that has been severed. The empty throne might be a symptom of that severance, a lingering echo of a god who is slowly fading from the abyss, leaving only his children behind to hold the fort. But let's be honest, the atmosphere in the hall suggests otherwise. The fire is roaring too brightly, the mead is flowing too freely, and the magic is too potent for this to be the realm of a fading deity. Shor is present in the static charge of the air. He is present in the static charge of the air. He is present in the strength of the heroes. As Ysgramor says, he is there, just shielded. It's also worth noting that the Dragonborn is the only living thing in the room. Everyone else is dead. Dead eyes can see things living eyes cannot. It is entirely possible that Gormlaith, Felldir and Hakon look at that throne and see Shor sitting there, clear as day, winking at them. They might just be humouring you. Oh yes, Dragonborn, he's too bright. Sure, let's go with that. It's the ultimate inside joke of the afterlife. You're the guest of honour, but you're still an outsider. You still have a heartbeat, and that heartbeat blinds you to the full reality of the spirit plane. This touches on the unreliable narrator aspect of the Elder Scrolls universe. We only know what we are told or what we see, and both are fallible. The fact is the throne is empty. The truth is up for debate, but for the Nord warrior, it doesn't matter. They don't fight for a guy in a chair. They fight for the idea of the chair. They fight for the home that Shor built. And really, isn't that the ultimate power move? To be so powerful that you don't even have to show up to your own eternal party. You just leave the door unlocked, heap the kegs full, and let your reputation do the rest. So, we have the Golden Hall, and we have the missing god. But before you can even step foot in this hall to ponder the emptiness of the furniture, you have to get past the doorman. And in Sovengard, the doorman doesn't just check your ID, he checks your structural integrity. He checks if your ribs can withstand a hammer blow that could shatter a mountain. Leaving the warmth of the hall for a moment mentally, at least we have to look back at the obstacle that stands between the valley and the feast. The Whalebone Bridge. It is a beautiful, terrifying span of bone and magic, crossing a chasm that drops into the infinite void of Aetherius, and standing in the middle of it is a figure who makes the ebony warrior look like a novice. The bridge is the filter. The throne might be empty, but the bridge is very, very occupied. To understand the hall, you have to understand the test required to enter it, because in Sovengard admission isn't free. You pay in sweat, blood, and the bruising of ill ego. To reach that empty throne, however, you have to cross a chasm that makes the throat of the world look like a gentle curb step. Between the misty valley where lost souls wander and the warmth of the hall lies the Whalebone Bridge. This isn't just a piece of infrastructure, it is the ultimate bottleneck of the afterlife. A literal and spiritual filter designed to ensure that the party inside doesn't get crashed by anyone who hasn't earned their invite. The bridge itself is a marvel of eldritch design. It is constructed, as the name implies, from the spinal column of a leviathan. These aren't just any bones, they're massive, bleached vertebrae that curve elegantly over the void, forming a path that is perilously narrow and completely lacking in handrails. From an occupational health and safety standpoint, Sovengard is a nightmare, but for the Nords, this design is intentional. The bridge is the final test of courage. If you get vertigo, you don't belong in the Hall of Valor. You have to be willing to walk the spine of the world, suspended over a drop that doesn't end in the ground, but in the swirling nebulas of Aetherius. Standing at the apex of this bridge, arms crossed, looking like he chiseled himself out of the mountain rock, is Tsun. We will delve into his divine resume in a moment, but right now we're focusing on his function as the tester. In any other game, this character would be a boss fight you have to kill to progress. But Skyrim does something very specific here. You don't have to kill him, you just have to survive him. This leads us to the core in-game fact of the Whalebone Bridge. Access is not granted by death alone. Death gets you to the valley, but it does not get you across the bridge. To cross, you must issue a challenge. When you approach Tsun, he demands to know by what right you seek entry. This is one of the most satisfying dialogue trees in the entire game because it forces the player to declare their identity. Are you the listener of the Dark Brotherhood, the Archmage of Winterhold, the Harbinger of the Companions, or simply a Dragonborn? Here is the catch, and it's a detail many players miss in their rush to the feast. Tsun reacts differently to each claim. If you claim the right of entry as the listener of the Dark Brotherhood or the Master of the Thieves Guild, his tone shifts. He doesn't deny the power of those titles, but he views them with disdain. He essentially says, "That criminal nonsense doesn't impress anyone here, but I'll respect the hustle if you can back it up with a sword." It confirms that while Sovengard is a place of honour, it is not a place of morality in the strict sense. You can be a thief and get in, provided you are a brave thief who can withstand the blows of a god. The test isn't, were you a nice person? The test is, are you strong enough to walk the walk? The fight itself is the deadly test. When you draw your weapon, the bridge becomes an arena. Tsun is level 50, stands significantly taller than the tallest high elf, and hits like a freight train. He uses the Thutum, specifically Unrelenting Force, and Call of Valor, reminding us that shouting isn't just a Dragonborn trick, it's the language of the gods. The test is a brawl. It's a physical audit of your skills. For a mage character, this is terrifying because Tsun has high magic resistance. He closes the gap instantly. He forces you to fight on his terms. Now, let's bring in an obscure lore tidbit regarding the material of the bridge. Why whalebone? In the ancient Atmoran totem religion, the precursor to the modern Nordic pantheon Tobale was the totem of Tsun, the god of ransom and fraternity. Tsun is the brother of Sun, the bear. The bridge represents the connection between the trials of life, the bear, and the shelter of the afterlife, the whale. By crossing the whale, you are crossing into the protection of the shield brother. The bridge is a physical manifestation of the transition from struggle to rest. You are literally walking on the back of the god of succor to reach the hall of the god of trials. It's a beautiful symbiotic piece of architectural storytelling that most people miss because they are too busy trying not to get yeeted off the edge by a shout. This brings up a massive point of debate within the community, the pacifist problem. We know that Jurgen Windcaller, the founder of the Greybeards and the most famous pacifist in Nordic history, is inside the Hall of Valor. You can meet him. He sits there calm and serene. But how did he get past Tsun? If the Whalebone Bridge requires a trial by combat, and Jurgen Windcaller swore an oath of non-violence after the Battle of Reg Mountain, did he break his oath to get into heaven, or did he talk his way past the bouncer? The prevailing theory, and one that adds a layer of depth to the deadly test, is that the test is subjective. Tsun doesn't just measure DPS, damage per second, he measures will. When the Dragonborn approaches, Tsun sees a warrior, so he demands a warrior's test. If a mage approaches, he demands a test of magic. In the case of Jurgen Windcaller, the theory suggests that his test was one of endurance. He likely stood on the bridge, folded his arms, and let Tsun rain blows upon him. He swallowed the shouts just as the Greybeards teach. He proved his strength not by dealing damage, but by enduring it. He defeated the test by refusing to fight, which, for a master of the way of the voice, is the ultimate display of power. This recontextualizes the bridge not as a slaughterhouse, but as a mirror. It challenges you to be the absolute best version of whatever you are. But what happens if you fail? What if you aren't the Dragonborn or Jurgen Windcaller? What if you're just some guy named Sven who died fighting a wolf? The deadly part of the test implies consequences. We see lost souls in the mist who never make it to the bridge. They are afraid. They turn away from Tsun because they know they cannot beat him. This creates a heartbreaking reality for the afterlife. Getting to Sovngarde is only half the battle. You can be saved from the soul trap of the gems, or the clutches of Molag Bau, arrive in the beautiful valley of the afterlife and still end up homeless because you can't win a fist fight with the gatekeeper. These souls are left to wander the mists of the valley forever. They can hear the music from the hall. They can smell the roast ox. They can see the golden glow of the roof, but they can never touch it. It's a uniquely Nordic form of purgatory, being close enough to the party to hear the laughter, but not being strong enough to open the door. The bridge acts as a separator of the goodish from the great. There is also a terrifying aspect to the physics of the fight on the bridge. If you, the player, use the unrelenting false shout on Tsun, he staggers but rarely flies. But if he uses it on you, and you are standing too close to the edge, down you go. Where do you fall? The sky of Sovengard is Aetherius, the realm of pure magicka. Falling off the Whalebone Bridge likely means falling out of the pocket dimension of Sovengard and dissolving into the raw energy of the universe. It is total annihilation. The bridge is a tightrope over the cauldron of creation. The fact that Nords are willing to risk this final death just for a chance at a tankard of mead speaks volumes about their cultural priorities. We should also mention the cheating aspect. In the game, you can try to sprint past Tsun, you can try to use invisibility. It doesn't work. The lightning barrier on the other side of the bridge simply won't let you pass until Tsun gives the nod. This confirms that the test isn't just a physical hazing ritual, it is a magical contract. The bridge knows, the hall knows. The lightning is the enforcement mechanism of the rules. You cannot sneak into Valhalla. The bridge also serves as a narrative pacing mechanism. Up until this point, the afterlife has been melancholy. The valley is sad, filled with lost souls and mist. The bridge is the spark of action. It wakes the player up. It transitions the mood from funereal to gladiatorial. It reminds you that you are a Nord, at least in spirit, and Nords don't mope, they fight. And let's be honest, the view from the bridge is spectacular. If you have a moment between dodging axe swings, look down. You see the statues of the ancient avatars, the roots of the trees that hold the realm together, and the endless swirl of the nebula. It frames the Hall of Valor perfectly. It is the reveal shot. There is a final, subtle detail about the bridge's construction. The vertebrae are spaced out. There are gaps. You have to watch your footing. This roughness suggests that the bridge wasn't built by craftsmen. It was likely placed there. Some legends suggest that the Whalebone Bridge is the literal spine of the World Eater from a previous Kalpa, Cycle of Time, repurposed by Shor to serve as his walkway. If true, it means you are walking on the bones of the apocalypse to get to paradise. That is the most heavy metal concept in a game full of heavy metal concepts. So you've traded blows with the giant, you've proven that your sword arm is strong or your magic is potent. Some sheathe his weapon. He laughs, a booming sound that shakes the mist. It has been long since I had the pleasure of crossing steel with a true hero, he says. The path is open, the lightning barrier fades. The bridge, which was a gauntlet a moment ago, is now a red carpet, but as you walk past the Guardian, you can't help but look back at him. Who is this guy? Why is a god working as a doorman? Why isn't he inside drinking with the others? He is the shield-thane of Shor, and his story is a tragedy all its own. We have crossed the bridge, but now we must turn our attention to the keeper of the gate himself. Because Tsun isn't just an obstacle, he is a relic of a dead pantheon, standing vigil over a world that has largely forgotten his name. Having caught your breath and wiped the frost from your visor, you turn back to look at the titan who just tried to shout your soul out of your body. He stands there, arms folded once more, gazing back across the chasm toward the misty valley. He is a monolith of muscle and indifference, the eternal bouncer of the most exclusive club in the universe. This is Tsun, and to understand the Hall of Valor, you have to understand why a god is standing outside in the cold, while everyone else is inside eating roast ox. Tsun is the shield-thane of Shor. In the modern era of Skyrim, the term thane has lost a bit of its luster. It's mostly a title given to the Dragonborn in exchange for fetching a Jarl's lost helmet or clearing out a basement of skeevers, usually accompanied by a rusty axe and the housecarl who refuses to sit down. But in the ancient Nordic hierarchy, a shield-thane was something far more profound. They were the king's shadow. They were the first line of defense and the last line of retribution. They didn't just serve, they bled. Tsun's role as the gatekeeper is not a punishment, it is the ultimate expression of this ancient duty. He guards the Whalebone Bridge because that is where the enemy would come. And by enemy, we don't just mean unworthy souls, we mean the elven gods. This brings us to the core identity of Tsun, often lost in the theological soup of the imperial cult. If you ask an imperial priest about the god of work and commerce, they will point you to Zenithar. Zenithar is the polite, civilized version of the deity, the god who ensures fair trade, hard work, and that the crops come in on time. He is a god of contracts and coins. But Tsun is the raw primal ancestor of Zenithar. He is the god at trials against adversity, where Zenithar asks, "Did you work hard today?" Tsun asks, "Did you survive what tried to kill you?" The distinction is crucial. The Nords of old didn't pray to Tsun for a good harvest. They prayed to him when the harvest failed, and they had to survive the winter on bark soup and spite. He is the bear totem in the ancient Atmoran animal pantheon, while Stune, the whale, represents the ransom, the taking of prisoners, and the mercy of leverage. Tsun represents the fight that happens before the ransom is even an option. He is the berserker who stands his ground. There is a fascinating piece of obscure lore regarding why Swan is in Sovngarde in the first place. Unlike the Aedra Akatosh, Mara, Dibella, who are considered living gods, bound to the creation of the Mundus, Tsun is technically a dead god. During the Dawn era, in the cataclysmic wars between the wandering Elnothi, the ancestors of men, and the old Elnothi, the ancestors of elves, Tsun fell in battle. He died defending Shor from the elven champions. This death is what binds him to Sovengard. He isn't visiting, he lives here because he died here. His presence at the bridge is a continuation of that Dawn-era war. He is still protecting Shor, he is still holding the line against the foreign gods. When he tests the Dragonborn, he isn't just checking if you're strong, he's checking if you're an infiltrator. He's the eternal antibody of the Nordic spirit realm. This creates a tragic, noble aura around the character. While the heroes inside the hall are celebrating their mortal victories, Tsun is outside, eternally vigilant, remembering a war that ended thousands of years ago. He is the designated driver of the afterlife. We must also appreciate the visual storytelling of Tsun's character model. In a game full of heavy armor, Daedric plating, and dragon-scale robes, Tsun is wearing essentially a loincloth and a belt. This is often joked about in the community, god of trials, but not the god of shirts, but it serves a specific narrative purpose. It emphasizes the Nordic resistance to cold. 50% frost resistance is a racial trait after all, but scaled up to divine levels. The wind of Aetherius that freezes mortal blood is just a pleasant breeze to him. It also showcases his vulnerability. He has no shield, despite being a shield-thane. He is the shield. He blocks the path with his body. Fans often debate the magic bias of Tsun. When you speak to him as the Archmage of the College of Winterhold, his response is tepid. "Well done," he says. Even if the clever arts are not looked upon fondly by some, this line is a window into the cultural shift in Skyrim. The ancient Nords, the ones who built the barrows and enchanted the dragon priest masks, respected magic. It was the clever craft. Tsun, being from that ancient era, likely respects magic more than modern Nords do, but he acknowledges the current prejudice. He is a bridge between the eras as much as the realms. He remembers when Nords were the premier battle mages of Tamriel, even if his current guests have forgotten. There is also a significant interaction that occurs after the main quest is resolved. When Alduin is defeated, you don't just walk out the front door. You have to ask Tsun to send you back. He teaches you the Hall of Valor shout, which allows you to summon the heroes of Sovengard to Nairn. This cements Tsun's role as the conduit. He controls the flow of souls in both directions. He is the one who decides when a hero's work is done and when they are needed back on the mortal coil. But let's talk about the Tun versus Malakath theory that occasionally pops up in deep lore discussions. Some scholars note the similarities between Tsun and Trinomac, the elven champion who was eaten by Berethia and transformed into Malakath. Trinomac was the strongest knight at the elven pantheon, just as Tsun was the strongest of the Nordic. They were rivals. The fact that Tsun is still here, noble and golden, while Trinimac became the Daedric Prince of the Ostracized, highlights the divergence of the two cultures. Some died and kept his honour. Trinimac lived in a sense and lost his. Tsun stands as the anti-Malakath proof that strength doesn't have to be bitter. The encounter with Tsun also serves as a reality check for the player's ego. Up until this point, you are the Dragonborn. You are the Chosen One. You eat dragon souls for breakfast. But Tsun treats you like a promising rookie. He calls you pup or craveler. He isn't impressed by your destiny. He is impressed by your action in a world that constantly forms over the player. Tsun's stoic professionalism is refreshing. He doesn't care about your prophecy. He cares about your right hook. There is a melancholy to his posts too. He asks about the world of the living. How fares the world, you might ask, implying that he misses it. He misses the sun, the soil, the smell of rain on stone. Sovngarde is a paradise, but it is a static one. Nirn is dynamic. It changes, it bleeds, it grows. As the god of trials, he probably misses the struggle of mortal life. A trial isn't a trial if you can't lose, and as a god in his own realm, Tsun can't really lose. He is trapped in a state of perpetual victory which, for a warrior spirit, might get a little boring after the first few thousand years. Furthermore, we should note that Tsun is the only deity in Skyrim you can physically touch, excluding the avatars of aspects. You can't high-five Akatosh, you can't arm-wrestle Mara, but you can hit Tsun with an axe. This grounds the Nordic religion in a way the Imperial religion is not. Their gods are tangible, they are present, they are large men who block traffic. It makes the faith of the Nords feel more visceral. When a Nord swears by Shor's bones or Sun's breath, they aren't using metaphors, they are referencing a guy they hope to meet one day. As we turn away from Tsun, having gained his respect and passage, the atmosphere shifts. The bridge was a test of strength, a singular duel against a singular opponent. But the valley we just crossed and the air surrounding the hall is filled with a different kind of threat. It is a threat that strength alone cannot defeat. It is a threat that eats courage. Tsun guards the bridge, but he cannot guard the minds of those who wander the valley. He is a physical barrier, but the enemy has deployed a psychological weapon. A thick, choking fog has descended upon the afterlife, obscuring the golden roof, muffling the songs and turning the path to the hall into a labyrinth of despair. You see, the eternal promise has been hijacked. There is a reason the throne is empty, and there is a reason the throne is empty, and there is a reason the bridge is so quiet. The souls aren't showing up. They are being intersected. As we step off the bone-white span and onto the solid ground of the far side, the mist thickens. It swirls around your boots, cold and sticky, smelling not of pine and snow, but of old fear. This is not the natural weather of Sovngard. This is the breath of the World Eater. Stepping off the Whalebone Bridge, you might expect the golden glow of the Hall of Valor to immediately warm your face. You might expect the sounds of merriment to be deafening, but instead you step into a wall of grey. The air here is heavy, wet and suffocating. It clings to your armour like a second skin, dampening sound and blurring the world into a featureless void. This isn't just atmospheric rendering to save on frame rates. This is the mist of Alduin's hunger, and it is arguably the most terrifying weapon in the World Eater's arsenal. We need to be very clear about what this mist is. It is not weather. Sovengard, located in Aetherius, doesn't have a water cycle in the traditional sense. It doesn't rain here because clouds happen to form. This mist is a magical construct, a spiritual snare net woven from the soul energy of the devoured. It is a physical manifestation of fear and confusion. The core in-game fact that players encounter here is visceral and disturbing. As you navigate this fog, you don't just see trees and rocks, you see people. You see Stormcloaked soldiers and Imperial Legionnaires, wandering aimlessly, hands held out as if feeling for a wall that isn't there. They are lost. They have passed the trials of life. They have died with honour. They have arrived in the Holy Land. And now, meters from the finish line, they are blind. They cannot see the Hall of Valor, even though it is massive and right in front of them. The mist separates the soul from its reward. This is Alduin's hunting strategy. In the wild, the predator separates the weak from the herd. In the afterlife, Alduin separates the soul from its hope. By blinding them with this magical fog, he keeps them confused and stationary, making them easy pickings. It is spawn camping on a cosmic scale. The souls arrive, disoriented by death, and before they can get their bearings or find a bridge, the mist swallows them. And then the shadow falls. The horror of this section of the game is often overlooked because players are rushing to the final boss fight. But pause for a moment and listen. Above the muffled wind, you hear the beat of massive wings. You see a dark shape swoop down through the grey. A scream cut short, and then silence. Alduin is flying patrols in the mist, snacking on the souls of the honoured dead like they are popcorn. This brings us to a chilling realization about the title World Eater. For most of the game, we assume this means he destroys the physical planet of Nirn, burning cities, toppling mountains. But here, in the spirit realm, we see the true horror of his hunger. He eats the animus. He consumes the very essence of what makes a person. This leads to one of the darkest and most debated fan theories in the Elder Scrolls community, the true death hypothesis. When a mortal dies in Tamriel, their soul typically goes to the Dream Sleeve to be recycled, or to a specific plane of Oblivion or Aetherius, like Sovngarde if they are pledged to a deity. Immortality of the soul is the standard. But what happens when a soul is eaten by a dragon, specifically by the firstborn of Akatosh? The theory suggests that souls eaten by Alduin are not just killed, they are erased, they are digested into nothingness, or perhaps fueled into Alduin's power to grow his size and strength. If this is true, then the soldiers wandering this mist face a fate worse than any hell. They face absolute non-existence, the erasure of their history, their memories, their I am. It raises the stakes of the final battle immensely. You aren't just saving the world, you are saving the fundamental right of these souls to exist. We must also look at the mechanics of how the player interacts with this mist. You cannot cut it with a sword. You cannot burn it with a fireball. The only way to clear it is with the Thu'um, specifically the Clear Skies shout. This is a beautiful narrative integration of gameplay and lore. Clear Skies, Lot Vakur, is often treated as a utility shout, something you use to get a nice screenshot of the aurora or stop the rain in solitude. But here, it becomes a weapon of divine will. The mist is Alduin's will imposed on reality. He wills the sky to be dark, he wills the souls to be lost. When the Dragonborn shouts "Look," they are shouting sky, but in the dragon language, concepts are realities. You are not asking the sky to clear, you are commanding the reality of the sky to assert itself over the corruption of the dragon. You are shouting, "This is not your domain, this is the domain of Kine, this is the domain of the light." Notice that the mist fights back, you shout, and the path clears. Sunlight or ethereal light bursts through. The lost souls look up, hope dawning on their faces. They see the hall, they start to run toward it. But then, inevitably, the mist rolls back in. Alduin's power is immense. It takes repeated shouts, a repeated assertion of your will to keep the path open. It is a tug-of-war of shouts between two shards of Akatosh. There is an obscure detail found in the game files and developer notes regarding the visual design of the mist. It uses a unique shader effect that isn't used anywhere else in Skyrim. It's designed to look oily. It has a subtle, sick sheen to it. This reinforces the idea that this isn't natural moisture. It is a pollution of the spirit realm. It represents the decay of the Kalpar, the cycle of time that Alduin is supposed to end. We should also touch on the tragedy of the NPCs you meet in the mist. You might run into Ulfric Stormcloak or Galmar Stonefist if you sided with the Empire. You might run into Legate Riki if you sided with the Stormcloaks. Seeing them here, stripped of their political bravado, scared and lost, humanizes the Civil War conflict in a way the rest of the game rarely does. When you meet Ulfric in the mist, he's somber. Skyrim was betrayed, the blood of her son spilled in doomed struggle, he laments. He realizes, too late, that the war for the throne was petty compared to the war for the soul. The mist acts as a great equalizer. It doesn't care if you are a high king or a grunt. To Alduin, you are all just calories. It renders the political squabbles of Nirn absurdly small. This section of the journey also serves to highlight the impotence of the other heroes. Gormlaith, Felldir, and Hakon the ancient tongues are waiting on the Ursad side. They are trapped in the hall, or just outside it because they cannot navigate the mist either, or rather, they know that venturing too far out into the mist alone is suicide. They need a catalyst. They need someone with a fresh, living voice to pierce the darkness. The mist also serves a structural purpose in the narrative of the zone. It builds tension. After the high-octane fight with Tsun, the game slows you down. It forces you to walk, it forces you to listen, it creates a sense of claustrophobia. The Hall of Valor is so close you can almost touch it, but you are blinded. It creates a yearning in the player. You want to get out of this fog. You want to get out of this fog. You want to get to the fire. It aligns the player's emotional state with that of the lost souls. And let's consider the source of the mist. It seems to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, but lore suggests it is exhaled by Alduin himself. In the ancient texts, dragons are often described as having breath that is fire and frost and emptiness. This mist is the emptiness aspect. It is the breath of the void. When you finally chain together enough shouts to reach the entrance of the hall, the contrast is staggering. You step from a world of grey silence into a world of gold and song. The mist stops abruptly at the threshold of the hall's influence. This suggests that the Hall of Valor itself generates a protective field, a localized reality where Alduin's power cannot penetrate. The hall is a sanctuary in the truest sense. It is a lighthouse in a storm of soul-eating fog. But before we enter that sanctuary, we must acknowledge the courage it takes to walk through that mist. The souls who are lost are not cowards. They are simply outmatched. They are fighting a god with mortal weapons. It reminds us that in the Elder Scrolls universe, the Divines and Daedra are not abstract concepts. They are active, often malevolent forces that can reach out and crush you even after you've died. The mist teaches us that the journey to Sovengard is not a guarantee of safety. It is a journey through a hostile wilderness. The afterlife has its own ecosystem, its own predators, and its own weather, and the forecast for today is heavy fog with a chance of apocalypse. As the Dragonborn clears the final stretch of the path, the mist recoils, hissing like a burned animal. The massive doors of the Hall of Valor loom ahead, intricate carvings depicting the very history we are living. The sound of the wind dies down, replaced by the thrum of warmth radiating from the stones. We have made it. We have run the gauntlet. We have crossed the bridge and pierced the veil. Now we push open the doors. The light hits us first, bright, warm, golden. Then the smell of roast meat. Then the shearing, standing there, mug in hand, waiting for the fogs to clear so she can finally get back to the business of dragon slaying, is a woman who has been waiting for this rematch for thousands of years. She is the first face we see, and frankly, she's the one you'd want on your side in a bar fight. Let's meet the legends. Let's meet the woman who looked at a dragon and decided to turn it into a hat. As the heavy oak doors of the Hall of Valor swing inward, the silence of the mist is instantly annihilated by a wall of sound. The roar of the fire, the clatter of tankards, the booming laughter of 1,000 generations of warriors. It hits you like a physical wave. The warmth is immediate, thawing the ice from your armor and the dread from your soul. And standing there, practically vibrating with pent-up energy, is the first of the 3 Gormlaith Golden Hilt. If the Hall of Valor is a waiting room, Gormlaith is the person pacing back and forth, checking her watch, and asking the receptionist when the doctor is going to be ready. She is not here to rest. She is here to reload. Gormlaith represents the sheer, unadulterated offense of the ancient Nords. While other heroes might be celebrated for their wisdom or their defensive stands, Gormlaith is celebrated because she killed things. A lot of things. Specifically, dragons. She is the archetype of the Nord Shield Maiden, but stripped of any romanticized softness. She is grit, steel, and a sword arm that likely has its own gravitational pull. The core in-game fact that every player remembers, or should remember, is that we have met her before. We didn't just meet her spirit here in the hall, we saw her die. Way back at the throat of the world, when you opened the Elder Scroll and peered back through the currents of time to the Morathic era, you were riding shotgun in the memories of the ancient tongues. You saw the final stand against Alduin. You saw Gormlaith, Hakon, and Felldir atop the mountain. Do you remember her end? It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't a fade to black moment surrounded by loved ones. She charged Alduin head on. she engaged the World Eater in single combat to buy time for her allies to ready the Dragon Wren's shout. And for her trouble, she was snatched up in Alduin's jaws and flung like a rag doll, broken and lifeless. To the player, it was a scripted event, a tragedy to set the stakes. But to Gormlaith, that moment has been burning in her memory for thousands of years. She didn't die defeated, she died interrupted, and now that you, the Dragonborn, have walked through that door, she knows the pause button has finally been unpressed. Gormlaith's title, Golden Hilt, isn't just a fancy nickname. It points to a specific piece of obscure lore regarding the economics of the Dragon War. In the Merethic era, the Dragon cult held all the wealth. They hoarded the ebony, the gold, and the enchanted items. For a rebel leader like Gormlaith to possess a sword with a golden hilt like he enchanted, and of masterwork quality implies she didn't buy it. She took it. It is a trophy weapon, likely pried from the cold, dead fingers of a high-ranking dragon priest. Every time she draws that sword, she is flashing a symbol of insurrection. It says, "I took your power, and now I'm going to use it to cut your god's head off." Her armor, too, tells a story. If you look closely at her model in the hall, she is wearing a unique set of ancient Nord armor, but it's pristine. In the tombs of Skyrim, we see this armor rusted and rotting on Drower. Seeing it here, polished and gleaming, gives us a window into what the Nords of the Merethic era actually looked like. They weren't just barbarians in furs, they were a sophisticated warrior culture with advanced metallurgy. Gormlaith is a relic of a time when humanity was fighting a war for survival against a superior aerial force, and her gear reflects that functional brutality. There is a fascinating debate within the lore community regarding Gormlaith's relationship with the Thuquin. We know she is a tunnel master of the voice, but unlike the Greybeards, who view the voice as a form of worship, or the Dragonborn, who uses it as a superpower, Gormlaith views the voice as artillery. This sparks the militant versus monastic debate. The Greybeards preach the way of the voice, a pacifist philosophy developed by Jurgen Windcaller after the disaster at Red Mountain. But Gormlaith predates Jurgen by centuries. To Gormlaith, the idea of not using the voice to kill your enemies would be insanity. Imagine telling a modern soldier they can only use their rifle for ceremonial salutes. Gormlaith represents the old way of the Thurum, the way it was intended by Kain when she taught it to men via Parthenax. It was a weapon of liberation. A presence in Sovengard, honoured and elevated, validates that the peaceful way of the voice is not the only way. You can shout people apart and still get into heaven. In fact, Shor seems to prefer it. When you speak to her in the hall, her dialogue is frantic. "At long last, Alduin's doom is now ours to seal," she cries. There is no fear in her voice. Most souls in a hall are content to drink and wrestle, waiting for the end of the world, but Gormlaith is restless. This touches on the psychology of the eternal warrior. For her, Sovengard isn't a retirement home, it's a barracks. She has likely spent every day of her afterlife sharpening that sword, running drills, and shouting at the ceiling, waiting for the portal to open. We must also consider the gender dynamics she represents in ancient Nordic society. Skyrim is a fairly egalitarian place in the Fourth Era. Women are Jarls, housecarls, and bandits. But Gormlaith proves this isn't a modern development. In the ancient wars everyone fought, the legend says that Gormlaith killed 4 dragons in a single day during the height of the rebellion. Think about the logistics of that. Killing 1 dragon in Skyrim is a boss fight. Killing 4 back to back without the ability to quick save, that puts her in a league of her own. She is the terrifying aunt of the Nord race, the one who teaches the kids how to throw an axe while the parents are horrified. There is a darker undercurrent to her story, however. The violence of the Dragon Wall was extreme. We are talking about a slave rebellion against god kings. The explicit gore of that era is often glossed over, but we can infer it. Gormlaith didn't just fight dragons, she fought her own kin who were loyal to the cult. She waded through rivers of blood to break the shackles of her people. Does that trauma linger in the afterlife? In the Hall of Valor, the mead washes away the pain, but it doesn't wash away the memory. Gormlaith remembers the smell of burning flesh at the sack of Bromjunarar. She remembers the screams of men dissolved by dragon breath. Her eagerness to kill Alduin isn't just heroism, it's vengeance. It's personal. She watched her friends die. She watched her world burn, and she's had thousands of years to stew on that hatred. Interestingly, Gormlaith is the one who urges action. When the Dragonborn arrives, the other heroes are cautious. They know the mist is dangerous, but Gormlaith is ready to charge out the door immediately. "Just try to hold me back," she yells. This characterizes her as the spark. Every revolution needs a spark, and she was likely the one who started the fires of the Dragon War in the first place. She is impulsive, dangerous, and utterly necessary. This leads to a fan theory about the constellations. Some lore enthusiasts link the three heroes, Gormlaith, Hakon, and Felldir, to the Guardian Stones: the warrior, the thief, and the mage. Gormlaith is clearly the warrior, the thief, and the mage. Gormlaith is clearly the warrior. She is direct force. She relies on her blade and her armor. She is the anvil against which the dragons broke. But she is also the storm. Her use of the shout dragon rend requires a hatred that grounds the dragon, forcing it to experience mortality. Gormlaith's hatred was so pure, so potent, that it could pull a god out of the sky. Visually, when we see her in the final battle against Alduin, which we will get to later, she is a whirlwind. But in the hall, she is a coiled spring. Watch her idle animations. She checks her grip. She shifts her weight. She is surrounded by endless food and drink, the finest pleasures of the afterlife, and she ignores them. She is fasting for the fight. This level of discipline is terrifying. It implies that for Gormlaith, the war never ended. She has been on active duty for the entirety of her death. We should also mention her relationship with the Dragonborn. When she looks at you, she doesn't see a stranger. She sees a reinforcement. She treats you as a shield sibling immediately. There is no prove-yourself moment with Gormlaith like there is with Tsun. If you made it to the hall, that's proof enough for her. She hands you the baton. "We started this," she seems to say. "Now let's finish it." Her death in the Merethic era was a sacrifice play. She drew aggro. By charging Alduin, she forced him to focus on her, which allowed Felldir the time to use the Elder Scroll. She knew she couldn't win that duel. A mortal, even a tongue, cannot go toe-to-toe with the World Eater in a physical brawl. She went in knowing she was going to die, just to buy a few seconds on the clock. That is the definition of valor. That is why she has a reserved seat at the high table. Gormlaith is only one part of the triad. She is the sword-sharp, deadly, and straightforward, but a sword is useless without a hand to guide it and a plan to direct it. The Dragon War wasn't won by brute force alone. It was won by something far more dangerous, a piece of creation itself, wielded by a man who was crazy enough to use it. Standing near Gormlaith, looking less like a berserker and more like a man bearing the weight of a terrible secret, is Felldir the Old. He is the mage to Gormlaith's warrior, the strategist who looked at an unwinnable war and decided to cheat. Gormlaith is the fury of the storm, but Felldir is the eye. And as we turn to him, we realize that while Gormlaith wants to kill the dragon, Felldir is the one who figured out how to banish it. He is the architect of the Time Wound, and his story is one of cosmic gambling. If Gormlaith is the fire that burns the house down, Felldir is the architect who realizes the house is structurally unsound and decides to detonate the foundation. Standing a little apart from the boisterous energy of the Shield Maiden, we find Felldir the Old. He is less interested in the clash of steel and more concerned with the metaphysical bill that is about to come due. He represents the mage archetype of the ancient trio, but don't let the robes fool you. In the Merethic era, a mage was just a warrior who threw lightning instead of axes. Felldir is the man who ended the Dragon War. Gormlaith and Hakon fought the battles, but Felldir ended the war. And he did it by pulling the ultimate cosmic prank. He banished the enemy to the future. The core in-game fact here is pivotal to the entire plot of Skyrim. It was Felldir who, atop the throat of the world, took out the Elder Scroll, or Kell, in the dragon tongue, and read the prophecy that cast Alduin adrift in the currents of time. He didn't kill the World Eater, he simply evicted him. He looked at a god and said, "Not today," and pushed him into the Fourth Era. This action defines his character and his presence in the Hall of Valor. While Gormlaith is eager for the fight, Felldir carries a heavy, palpable sense of responsibility. He knows that the Dragonborn is here specifically because of what he did. When you look at Felldir, you are looking at the man who created your destiny. He saved his own timeline by dooming yours. It's a heavy burden to carry through eternity. Let's dig into the obscure lore of the Elder Scrolls themselves to understand the magnitude of his courage. We treat the scrolls as quest items 20 weight, undeniable value, looks good on a shelf. But in the lore, an Elder Scroll is a fragment of creation. It is a piece of the airbyes that exists outside of time and space. To read one is to risk instant blindness, madness, or having your brain scrambled like a failed alchemy experiment. The Moth Priest spent decades preparing just to read a single line. Felldir didn't just read it, he weaponized it. He used a tool of prophecy as a banishment spell. This is the magical equivalent of using a nuclear reactor to hammer in a nail. It worked, but it tore a hole in reality the time wound that Parthenak's guards. The fact that Felldir had the mental fortitude to wield the Celt against a dragon god without turning into a vegetable is why he is in the Hall of Valor. It was a feat of willpower that rivals any physical combat. However, this leads to a massive community debate. Was Felldir a hero or a coward? There is a strong argument that Felldir cheated. The Nord value honourable combat. They value facing your death. By sending Alduin away, Felldir avoided the final confrontation. He passed the buck to the future generations. He saved his own skin and the skin of his people by outsourcing the apocalypse to you, the player. Parthenaks himself criticizes this choice, noting that the ancients did not know what they did. They tampered with forces they didn't understand because they were desperate. But the counter-argument, and the one that likely earned him his seat in Shor's Hall, is that he did what was necessary to save the human race. Honor is great, but survival is better. If Felldir hadn't used the scroll, humanity would have been wiped out in the Merethic era. There would be no Whiterun, no Empire, no Dragonborn. He made the hard, pragmatic choice. He sacrificed the purity of the fair fight for the continued existence of his species. In a way, that is the ultimate sacrifice of honor. He stained his own legend to ensure there would be anyone left to tell it. The old is an interesting epithet. It implies wisdom, but also weariness. In a flashback, Felldir looks aged, perhaps prematurely looks aged. Using an Elder Scroll takes a toll. It drains the life force. It is possible that Felldir was a young man when he first picked up the Kell, and by the time he put it down, he was the old. The magic aged him. This adds a layer of tragic body horror to his story. He gave his youth to the scroll. In the Hall of Valor, Felldir is the voice of reason. When Gormlaith shouts about attacking, Felldir is the one calculating the odds. The World Eater waits within the mist, he warns. He understands the trap. He knows that Alduin is stronger now than he was then. Why? Because Alduin is stronger now than he was then. Why? Because Alduin has been feeding on souls in Sovngarde. Felldir realizes that his banishment plan might have actually made things worse in the long run. He sent a hungry dragon into a buffet. There is a subtle connection here to the clever men of Nordic history. In modern Skyrim, magic is distrusted, but Felldir represents the era when the clever men were essential. He is a callback to the time when Nords were magically adept. He likely worshipped Junor, the Nordic god of logic and hermetic orders, a deity who has almost vanished from the modern Nordic pantheon, replaced by the more imperialized Julianos or simply ignored. Felldir is a relic of a smarter, more arcane Skyrim. We also have to consider the relationship between Felldir and Parthenaks. They were co-conspirators. Parthenaks provided the opportunity, Felldir provided the weapon. But notice that Parthenaks is not in Sovngarde, obviously being a dragon and alive, but he speaks of his old allies with a mix of respect and pity. He knows they were children playing with matches. Felldir in the afterlife likely has a complex view of the old dragon. Was Parthenaks' betrayal of Alduin genuine, or was it just another power play? Felldir probably spends a lot of his eternal feast analysing that relationship. Visually, Felldir stands out. He wears robes over his armour. This battle mage aesthetic is rare in Skyrim. You have the vigilance of Stendarr and a few spell swords, but a full-blown armoured wizard is a niche build. It reinforces that he bridged the gap between the warrior culture and the intellectual elite. He fought with his mind first, his hands second. When the Dragonborn arrives, Felldir's relief is palpable. "You bring the light," he exclaims. For him, your arrival is the closure of a contract he signed thousands of years ago. He has been waiting for the last Dragonborn to finish the sentence he started. The time wound was an ellipsis. You are the period. There is also a terrifying implication about the Elder Scroll itself. We know the scrolls have a will of their own. They move, they vanish, they change their text. Did Felldir control the scroll, or did the scroll use Felldir? Perhaps the prophecy required Alduin to be sent forward so that he could be destroyed by the Dragonborn, whose soul is strong enough to absorb him. Maybe Felldir was just a pawn in a game played by the scrolls themselves. If he suspects this, it would explain his somber mood. It's hard to enjoy the mead when you suspect you were just a tool for a piece of paper. But despite his reservations, when the time comes to leave the hall, Felldir does not hesitate. He joins Gormlaith. He doesn't try to use another trick. He draws his weapon. This is his redemption arc. He is done with banishing. He is done with delaying. This time, he intends to fight until the end. He wants to clear the ledger. It's worth noting that Felldir's shout during the final battle is often the one that debuffs Alduin. In the lore of the fight, while Gormlaith is the DPS, damage, and Hakon is the tank, Felldir is the support. He uses the voice to strip away Alduin's defenses. He shouts, "Dragonren," with a unique understanding of its meaning. To force a dragon to understand mortality, you have to understand it yourself. Felldir here, who stared into the infinite complexity of the Elder Scroll, understands the fragility of life better than anyone. His shout hits harder because he knows exactly how small mortals really are. So, we have the sword, Gormlaith, and the staff, Felldir. But a party needs a shield. It needs someone who can stand in the fire and not burn. It needs a tank who is too angry to die. Completing the trio is Hakon One-Eye. He stands with them, but he carries a different kind of weight. He isn't eager like Gormlaith, and he isn't philosophical like Felldir. He is just furious. He is the embodiment of the grudge, and as we look at his scarred face, we have to ask, what happened to the eye, and why is his anger the glue that holds this legendary team together? Let's meet the man who stared down the apocalypse and only blinked once. And then there is the third pillar of this ancient trinity, the man who completes the defensive line against the apocalypse. If Gormlaith is the tip of the spear and Felldir is the guiding hand, Hakon One-Eye is the shield wall. He stands with a brooding intensity that makes even the other heroes give him a wide berth. He is not here to celebrate. He is here to finish a brawl that started in the Merethic era. Hakon represents the tank archetype of the Nord legendarium. While Gormlaith is defined by her agility and aggression, and Felldir by his arcane wisdom, Hakon is defined by his durability. He is the immovable object to Alduin's unstoppable force. He is the personification of the Nordic ability to take a punch, or in this case, a blast of dragon fire, and keep standing just out of pure, unadulterated spite. The core in-game fact regarding Hakon is his physical presence in that pivotal flashback atop the throat of the world. We saw him standing shoulder to shoulder with Gormlaith. We saw him shouting at the sky. But unlike Gormlaith, who died instantly, and Felldir, who survived to use the scroll, Hakon occupies a painful middle ground in the history books. He survived the initial skirmish, but lived with the knowledge of their partial failure. He lived with the scars. His moniker, One-Eye, is the most obvious visual cue, but it carries deep mythological weight. In a surface-level reading, it's simply battle damage, a testament to a close call with a dragon's claw or a stray arrow during the insurrection. It serves as a permanent reminder of the price of freedom. Every time he looks in a mirror or a polished shield, he sees what the dragons took from him. However, the One-Eye title sparks a significant amount of discussion among lore scholars regarding the Odanic parallel. The Nordic pantheon is heavily inspired by real-world Norse mythology, and Odin, the All-Father, famously sacrificed an eye for wisdom. There is a fan theory that Hakon's lost eye is a symbolic nod to this. Did he lose it in exchange for the knowledge of the Dragonren's shout? Did he sacrifice a part of his physical perception to gain the spiritual insight needed to comprehend the concept of mortality well enough to shout it at a god? The shout Dragonrend Jorzafrul, translates to mortal finite temporary. It forces a timeless dragon to experience the concept of death. To learn this shout, one must internalize a hatred and a deep, visceral understanding of one's own limits. Losing an eye is a pretty good crash course in limitation. It fundamentally changes how you see the world literally and metaphorically. Hakon's missing eye might be the physical receipt for the purchase of the Dragonren shout. He traded half his vision to ground the World Eater. In the Hall of Valor, Hakon's demeanor is distinct from the others. He is less talkative. When he does speak, his voice is rough, like stones grinding together. The World Eater cowers in the mist, he says. He imputes cowardice to Alduin. This is interesting because most people fear Alduin. Hakon despises him. He views Alduin's retreat into the mist not as a tactical maneuver but as a weakness. This reframes the entire conflict. To Hakon, Alduin isn't a god, he's a bully who runs away when someone finally stands up to him. Hakon also embodies the battle cry racial ability of the Nords. In gameplay, this power causes enemies to flee in terror. Hakon is the living or dead incarnation of this effect. His rage is weaponized. It is said that in life, Hakon's roar could shatter the morale of an entire dragon cult phalanx. In death, that rage hasn't cooled, it has distilled. He has been marinating in it for thousands of years. There is an obscure lore tidbit that suggests Hakon had a brother who was devoured by Alduin. While not explicitly detailed in the main quest, background texts and developer concepts allude to the personal nature of the hero's vendettas. If true, this explains the specific flavor of Hakon's fury. It's not just political, it's familial. The Nords are a clan-based society. An offense against the kin is an offense against the self. Hakon fights with the weight of his lost family on his shoulders. He isn't just fighting for Skyrim. He is fighting to avenge the empty seats at his breakfast table. This connects to the wider theme of the tragic hero in Nordic culture. Hakon survived the Time Wound event. He watched Gormlaith die. He watched Felldir vanish into the mountains with the scroll. He was left alone to lead the remnants of the rebellion. He had to rebuild a world that had been shattered. The one eye might also symbolize his singular focus. He spent the rest of his life preparing for Alduin's return, knowing he wouldn't be alive to see it. He died with unfinished business. Now that the Dragonborn is here, Hakon sees the cycle closing. He treats you with a gruff, soldierly respect. He doesn't fawn over you. He assesses you. Is your blade sharp? Good, get in line. He sees you as a recruit. You are the fresh meat in the squad. He is the veteran sergeant who has seen it all and just wants to make sure you don't trip over your own feet when the shooting starts. The synergy between the three heroes is palpable in the hall. Gormlaith is the energy, Felldir is the plan, and Hakon is the glue. He checks Gormlaith's impulsiveness and grounds Felldir's impulsiveness and grounds Felldir's hesitation. He is the pragmatist. Enough talking, his stance says. Let's kill it. We must also appreciate the gear he wears. Like Gormlaith, he is clad in ancient Nord armor, but he wields a battle axe. The axe is the signature weapon of the Nord executioner and the woodsman. It is a tool of severing. It fits his personality perfectly. He wants to sever the head of the snake. His fighting style, which we will see in the final act, is brutal and efficient. He uses power attacks. He staggers the opponent. He creates openings for Gormlaith to exploit. There is a moment in the dialogue where Hakon expresses regret. "We should have finished him then," he mutters. This reveals the deep-seated guilt that plagues him. He feels they failed. They used the Elder Scroll as a panic button because they weren't strong enough to win the hard way. This insecurity drives him. He wants a do-over. He wants to prove that they can win without the cosmic cheat code. He wants to beat Alduin with steel and shout the old-fashioned way. The community often overlooks Hakon in favour of the more flashy Gormlaith or the mysterious Felldir, but Hakon is essential because he represents the common Nord. He isn't a magical prodigy. He isn't a legendary dragon slayer with a golden sword. He is just a guy who got angry enough to punch a god. He is the patron saint of the stubborn. He proves that you don't need to be special to be a hero. You just need to be unwilling to quit. His presence in the Hall of Valor also serves as a reminder of the physical toll of the Dragon War. The other souls in the hall might have died in clan wars or duels, but Hakon carries the scars of a war against divinity. He reminds the other feasters that there are things in the dark far worse than Stormcloaks or Imperials. When the call to arms finally comes, Hakon is the first to form up. He doesn't cheer like Gormlaith. He doesn't monologue like Felldir. He simply hets his axe and starts walking. That silence is more terrifying than any war cry. It is the silence of a man who has been rehearsing this murder for 5,000 years. But the Hall of Valor isn't just filled with ancient legends from the Merethic era. It is a living record of Skyrim's history, right up to the present day. As we move away from the intensity of the three heroes, we spot a figure who is much more recent, much more tragic, and significantly better dressed. Sitting quietly, perhaps nursing a cup of mead and looking somewhat melancholic, is a man whose death sparked the current civil war. He is a High King, but here he is just another soul. His presence answers one of the biggest political questions in the game, and proves that in Sovengard, the truth is often different from the propaganda. Let's approach High King Torygg, the man who was shouted apart by Ulfric Stormplague, and see what he has to say about honor, jewels, and the afterlife. Leaving the intense gravitational pull of the ancient tongues, we drift further into the hall, past tables laden with roasted ox and flagons that never seem to run dry. We move from the mythic past into the raw, bleeding present. Sitting at a slightly less crowded table, looking contemplative and perhaps a little out of place among the bearskin-wearing berserkers of the Merethic era, is a young man with a neatly trimmed beard and the bearing of nobility. This is High King Torygg. His presence here is the single most politically explosive fact in the entirety of the afterlife. Torygg is the patient zero of the Skyrim Civil War. His death at the hands, or rather the voice, of Ulfric Stormcloak is the inciting incident for the entire game. Depending on who you talk to in Solitude or Windhelm, Torygg was either a martyr, murdered by a power-hungry usurper, or a weakling puppet who was rightfully challenged and defeated. The propaganda machines on both sides have spun his death into a narrative convenient for their cause. But here in the Hall of Valor, the spin stops. The truth is binary. You are either in or you are out. And Torygg is in. This core in-game fact settles a massive theological argument. By allowing Torygg into the Hall of Valor, Shor and by extension, the fundamental laws of the Nord universe, has declared that Torygg died with honor. This is a huge deal. Remember the specifics of the duel. Ulfric challenged Torygg to the traditional old way of selecting a High King. Torygg accepted because to refuse would be to admit cowardice, which would restrict him of his right to rule and likely barred him from Sovengard anyway. He knew he was outmatched. He knew Ulfric was a war veteran and a tongue. Yet he drew his sword. Then Ulfric shouted. The force of the voice knocked Torygg to the ground or ripped him apart, depending on the dramatic retelling, and Ulfric finished him. Many Stormcloak supporters argue that Torygg was weak and therefore unworthy. Many Imperial supporters argue that Ulfric cheated by using the voice, but Sovengard's bouncer, Tsun, clearly checked the replay and ruled it a valid death. Torygg stood his ground. He faced a superior opponent. He didn't beg, he died fighting. That is the only metric that matters here. It confirms that honor in Skyrim isn't about winning, it's about how you lose. You can get absolutely steamrolled by a demigod, but if you take it on the chin without flinching, you get a seat at the table. There is a profound melancholy to Torygg's dialogue in the hall. He doesn't rage against Ulfric like a vengeful spirit. He doesn't demand the Dragonborn go back and burn Windhelm to the ground. Instead, he says, "When Ulfric Stormcloak with savage shout sent me here, my sole regret was fair Elisif, left forlorn and weeping. His only regret is his wife." This humanizes him immensely. He isn't a political symbol here. He's just a young husband who misses the woman he loved. It casts the Civil War in a tragic light. All those battles, all those deaths, all that rhetoric about the white gold concordat, and at the center of it is just a grieving man who worries about his widow. This leads us to the fair fight community debate. Does the use of the Thurum in a duel constitute cheating? The Greybeards would say the voice should only be used for worship. The Empire calls it murder. But the ancient Nords, the ones sitting all around Torygg in this hall, would likely side with Ulfric on the method, if not the motive. To the ancient Nords, the voice was a weapon. If you have it, use it. If you challenge a wizard to a duel, don't be surprised if he uses fire. If you challenge a tongue, don't be surprised if he shouts. Torygg's presence here implies that he accepts the terms of his defeat. He doesn't claim he was murdered, he claims he was bested. However, there is a biting irony if you play through the Civil War on the Imperial side and kill Ulfric. If Ulfric dies, where does he go? We do not see him in the Hall of Valor. We see him in the mist. Let that sink in. The man who started a war to restore Nord glory and secure his place in Sovengard is wandering around outside in the fog, lost and blind, while the Imperial puppet he killed is inside enjoying the buffet. Why? Perhaps because Ulfric's war caused so much chaos that his soul is weighed down by the devouring nature of his actions. Or perhaps in his final moments he felt doubt. Or maybe he just hasn't found the bridge yet. But the visual contrast, Torygg warm and safe, Ulfric cold and lost, is the devastating critique of the Stormcloak Rebellion from the perspective of the afterlife. We should also look at the obscure lore regarding the king-making traditions. The moot meets to choose a high king, but the right of challenge is an even older tradition. By accepting the challenge, Torygg was adhering to the strictest interpretation of Nord law, even though he was essentially an imperialized Nord who likely preferred diplomacy to violence. In that final moment, he reverted to his Atmoran roots. He chose the old way. This choice is what saved his soul. If he had called the guards or refused the duel, he might be alive on Nirn, but he would be dead to Sovengard. He traded his life for his eternity. Visually, Torygg stands out because his clothes are relatively intact and noble. He isn't wearing the heavy primal iron of the ancients. He represents the modern era Skyrim, a bit softer, a bit more civilized, but still carrying that core seed of iron. The other heroes in the hall probably look at him with a mix of curiosity and respect. So, this is what a High King looks like now, they might think. Not much muscle, but he stood before a ton and didn't run. He'll do. There is also a poignant interaction if the Dragonborn is the one who killed Ulfric. Torygg doesn't thank you explicitly for vengeance. The Hall of Valor washes away the pettiness of revenge. The perspective of eternity makes the squabbles of Nirn seem small. He seems to understand that the Civil War was a tragedy of necessity, a symptom of a world that is breaking down. He is resigned. Torygg's section of the hall serves as a reminder that Sovengard is not just for warriors who die on the battlefield. It is for anyone who faces their end with courage. A king who dies in his throne room is just as valid as a soldier who dies in a trench, provided the internal state of valor is present. It's also worth noting that Torygg is the only character in the hall who mentions a specific living person, Elisif by name, with such longing. The ancient heroes talk about the dragon or the war. They are detached from the specifics of their mortal lives because those lives were thousands of years ago. Their spouses and children are long dead and likely sitting a few tables away, but for Torygg, the wound is fresh. Elisif is still alive. He is waiting for her. It adds a romantic, tragic layer to the afterlife. He is saving a seat. This brings up the time in Sovengard question. How does time work here? Does it feel like Torygg has been waiting for years or just minutes? The flow of time in Aetherius is non-linear. To him, the wait for Elisif might feel like a blink, or it might feel like an eternity. But he waits. There is a subtle detail in the way the other heroes interact with him, or rather, don't. He sits a bit apart. This might be out of respect for his rank, or it might be because he is the new guy. He hasn't earned his war stories yet. He has one story, I got shouted at. It's a short story, but in Sovengard, you have forever to embellish it. We must also consider what Torygg represents for the future of Skyrim. His death broke the stalemate. It forced the province to choose a side. In a way, he is a sacrificial lamb. His death was the catalyst that weakened Skyrim enough for the dragons to return, according to the prophecy, but also the catalyst that brought the Dragonborn into the fray. Without the Civil War, the Dragonborn might have been caught at the border and just let go or executed sooner. The chaos of his death created the opportunity for the hero to emerge. He is the accidental father of the world's salvation. As we leave Torygg to his thoughts and his mead, we realize that the Hall of Valor is a tapestry of different kinds of bravery. There is the bravery of the berserker, the bravery of the wizard, the bravery of the tank, and the bravery of the victim who refuses to be a victim in spirit. But amidst all these dead heroes, there is one anomaly, one glitch in the Matrix, one person who is breathing, sweating, and casting a shadow that shouldn't exist. You. The Dragonborn is walking around a room full of ghosts, eating their food and listening to their songs. This shouldn't be possible. The barriers between Mundus and Aetherius is strict. The fact that you are here, in a physical body, is a violation of cosmic law so severe that it technically classifies as a miracle. Let's talk about the living visitor phenomenon, and why the bouncer lets you in with your pulse still checking out as active. Because you aren't the first person to try this, but you are the first one to do it without dying in the process. Among the boisterous laughter of the mead hall and the clanking of golden tankards, there is a subtle, unspoken tension that follows you as you move through the crowd. You are an anomaly, a glitch. Every other entity in this room is a memory wrapped in magicka, a soul stripped of its mortal coil. That you are meat and bone, you are blood and breath. You are a walking, breathing violation of the natural order. This brings us to the 10th fact, and arguably the most technically impressive feat of the Dragonborn's career. The forbidden nature of the living visitor. In the vast cosmology of the Elder Scrolls, mortals aren't supposed to visit Aetherius and come back to talk about it. It's a one-way street. The traffic flows from birth to death, not the other way around. By standing in the Hall of Valor with a pulse, the Dragonborn is doing the metaphysical equivalent of swimming up a waterfall. The core in-game fact that underscores this exclusivity is the location of the entrance, Skuldafnen. You cannot fast travel to Skuldafnen. You cannot walk there. You cannot ride a horse there. It is a mountaintop fortress completely cut off from the rest of Skyrim, accessible only by flight. Since the Empire hasn't invented airplanes yet, and levitation magic was banned by the Levitation Act of 3E421, the only way in is via Dragonback. This makes the portal to Sovengard the most heavily gated community in existence. Skuldafn acts as the airlock between the mortal world, Mundus, and the spiritual world, Aetherius. The fact that the Dragoncold built their headquarters there implies that they were the original gatekeepers. They controlled who got to go to heaven. The portal itself, that swirling column of light guarded by the dragon priest Nakrien, is not a natural phenomenon. It is a piece of industrial-grade magical engineering. It requires a dragon priest staff to operate, essentially a keycard to the afterlife. The fact that you have to kill Nakrien, whose name translates to vengeance, to get the key adds a layer of poetic violence to the entry process. You have to overcome vengeance to find peace. But why is this so rare? Why haven't powerful wizards like Neloth or the Pilgic monks set up vacation homes in Sovengard? This leads us to an obscure and honestly quite bizarre piece of lore regarding the space race of the Merethic and First Eras. Yes, you heard that right. Tamriel had a space program. The lore texts mention the Sun Birds of Alinor, giant magical birds made of sun stuff used by the High Elves to attempt to breach the Veil of Aetherius. There were also the Imperial Monarnauts of the Riemann dynasty who built moth ships to sail the void. These early explorers tried to reach Aetherius physically. They failed, or they went mad, or they simply drifted off into the infinite void, never to return. The cost of entering Aetherius alive is usually sanity or existence. The pressure of the magicka in Aetherius is too high for a mortal vessel. It's like a deep-sea diver going to the bottom of the Mariana Trench without a submarine. You should be crushed. Yet, the Dragonborn walks around fine. This sparks a fascinating fan theory regarding the Dragonborn's divine biology. We know the Dragonborn has the soul of a dragon, a lesser Aedra, and the blood of a mortal. Dragons are native to the concepts of Aetherius. They are children of Akatosh. The theory suggests that your dragon soul acts as a pressurized suit. It buffers you against the raw creatia of the realm. You are, in essence, an amphibious spiritual entity, capable of breathing both the air of Nirn and the mana of Sovengard. This explains why other powerful mortals, like the Edeni warrior, have to die to get here. They don't have the suit. If the Ebony Warrior tried to walk through the Skuldafn portal while alive, he might have just disintegrated. You were the only one with the genetic clearance to walk the plains. The reaction of the NPCs in the hall reinforces your alien status. They are welcoming, yes, but they treat you with a specific kind of awe. The living, they whisper. It's the same tone we might use if a ghost walked into a Starbucks, but reversed. You are the ghost in their reality. You are the scary thing that shouldn't be there. You bring with you the scent of time. In Sovengard, time is fluid and arguably non-existent, which is why Gormlaith has been waiting thousands of years but is still ready to fight like it was yesterday. But you are bound by linear time. You are a ticking clock in a timeless room. There is also the matter of the Skuldafnir Heil. The portal at Skuldafn is physically located on Nirn, but it leads to a pocket realm. Some loremasters argue that Skuldafn itself exists in a dragon break stator place where time is broken and linearity is optional. This is why the dragons are always there and why the Draugr are so restless. It is a wound in the sky. By entering it, you are stepping out of the narrative of history and into the footnotes. We should also consider the implications of your inventory. You brought physical items with you. You brought cheese wheels, iron ingots, potion bottles, and maybe a lusty Argonian maid book. You have introduced matter from Mundus into a plane of pure spirit. When you eat a sweet troll in the Hall of Valor, does the sweet troll become spiritual energy? Or are you littering the afterlife with crumbs of reality? It's a funny thought, but it highlights the clash of dimensions. You are infecting Sovengard with reality. This living visitor status also gives you a unique tactical advantage against Alduin. Alduin is feeding on the dead. The dead are static. Their strength is fixed at the moment of their death. But you are living. You can learn. You can adapt. You can chug a potion of fortify strength. You possess the dynamic potential of the living, which is something Alduin, for all his power, has likely forgotten how to counter. He is used to eating souls that have given up. He isn't used to fighting a soul that is still attached to a body that wants to keep living. There is a dark possibility here too. What if you can't leave? The portal Sun opens for you at the end as a special favour. Without Sun's intervention, you would be trapped. A living human in Sovengard would eventually starve, assuming the roasted ox is spiritual food that doesn't nourish a physical body, or simply go mad from the sensory overload. The Dragonborn is walking a tightrope. One wrong move, one insult to Tsun, and you become just another permanent resident, except you'd be the only one who has to age and die the slow way. The exclusivity of Skuldafn also answers the question of why don't the Daedric princes just invade Sovengard? We know Molag Bal and Mehrunes Dagon love invading places, but they can't get in. The Skuldafn portal is key to the dragon cult and the dragon blood. It is a proprietary operating system. Even the Daedra, with all their power, cannot easily breach Shor's house. It requires a specific frequency of souls to open the door. We also have to appreciate the aesthetic of the portal itself. It sits at the very top of the world. Technically, the throat of the world is the highest peak, but Skuldafn feels higher because of the latitude. The column of light shoots straight up into the clouds. It is a visual tether. It suggests that Sovengard isn't another dimension in the sci-fi sense, but literally up there. If you could fly high enough and survive the lack of air and navigate the magical winds, you might just bump into the Hall of Valor. This physical connection is reinforced by the map. If you open your map in Sovengard, it doesn't show a blank void. It shows a misty terrain. You are still on the map, just a map that doesn't connect to Whiterun or Riften. You are in the attic of the world. As a living visitor, you also serve as a messenger. When you return to Skyrim, you are the only person who can confirm with 100% certainty that the Nords are right. The Imperials have faith. The Elves have ancestor worship, but the Nords have an eyewitness. You can walk into the Blue Palace and tell Asif, "I saw Torygg. He looks good. He misses you." That kind of validation is powerful. It cements the Nord culture as the correct one, at least in terms of their specific afterlife claims. But while your presence is a marvel and the hall is a comfort, we must remember where we actually are. We are not in a cave. We are not in a castle on a hill. We are floating in something much vaster. Walk out to the garden behind the hall. Look past the statues and the mist. Look up. The sky of Sovngarde is not the sky of Nirn. There are no moons. Marsa and Secunda are gone. The familiar constellations are shifted or missing entirely. Instead, you see a kaleidoscope of colour that defies astronomical explanation. To understand why this place is so magical, and why the Dragonborn can breathe here at all, we have to understand the geography of the cosmos. We are not on a planet anymore. We are in the source code of the universe. We are in Aetherius. Step out of the hall for a moment. Leave the noise of the feast, the clatter of cutlery, and the songs of war behind. Walk out to the rear courtyard, past the statues of the weeping kings, and just look up. If the Whalebone Bridge didn't give you vertigo, the sky of Sovngarde certainly will. We are used to the night sky of neon black, dotted with distant white pinpricks, dominated by the two moons, Massa and Secunda. It's a comfortable, familiar darkness. But here, the sky is alive. It is a churning, bioluminescent ocean of violet, gold, and teal. There is no black void here. There is only light folded over on itself in ribbons of cosmic energy. This brings us to the 11th fact, which fundamentally changes our understanding of location in the Elder Scrolls. Sovngarde is not a planet, nor a moon. It is a pocket realm anchored deep within Aetherius, the immortal plane. The core in-game fact that players notice immediately if they aren't too busy fighting is the constellations. On Nirn, the constellations, the warrior, the thief, the mage, are distant patterns of stars. Here they are massive, burning sigils that dominate the firmament. They rotate slowly, vibrant and heavy, as if they are right on top of you. You aren't looking at the stars here, you are standing among them. To understand why this is so spectacular, we have to dip into the creation myth. In the beginning, the god Magnus, the architect of the world, realized that creating the mortal plane was a trap that would drain his power. So he fled. He tore a hole in the fabric of reality to escape back to Aetherius. That hole is the sun, the lesser spirits who followed him. The Magna G tore smaller holes. Those are the stars. On Nirn, magic leaks into the world through those holes. Magic is starlight. But in Sovngarde, you have crossed the barrier. You are on the other side of the sieve. The sky here isn't filtering the light, it is the light. This explains the ambient hum you hear in the sound design of the zone. That isn't wind. That is the sound of raw, unfiltered creatia. It is the background radiation of magic itself. If you play a mage character, standing in Sovngarde should technically feel like standing inside a nuclear reactor of mana. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the missing moons in the sky. If you look up, you will notice that Massa and Secunda are gone. This absence fuels one of the most intense and specific debates in the lore community, lunar Lorcan theory. Standard imperial theology states that the two moons are the literal physical remains of Lorcan's body, his flesh divinity left rotting in the sky after his heart was ripped out. Since Sovngarde is Shor's realm, and Shor is Lorcan, some fans argue that Sovngarde is physically located on one of the moons. If you were on the moon, you wouldn't see the moon in the sky, right? You'd be standing on it. However, the visual evidence of Sovngarde contradicts this. We don't see a rocky, cratered lunar landscape. We see a lush twilight forest, and more importantly, we see the sky of Aetherius. If we were on the moons, we would still be in the mundus, the mortal plane, looking out at the stars. But here, the stars are the environment. This suggests that Sovngarde is not on the moons, but beyond them. It is a realm constructed from Lorcan's divine spark that exists parallel to his physical remains. The moons are his corpse, Sovngarde is his ghost. The colours of the sky also tell a story. The prevalence of purple and gold is significant. In Elder Scrolls colour theory, blue often represents magica, potential, while gold represents divinity and kinetic energy. The sky is a soup of potential becoming reality. The nebulas swirl in patterns that look suspiciously like the skill trees in the game's menu. This is a brilliant meta-narrative touch. The interface you use to level up is stylized after the very heavens of the afterlife. It implies that when the Dragonborn looks at stars to learn a new perk, they're channeling a little bit of Sovngarde. This celestial light show serves a function for the souls who dwell here. They don't need to sleep, though they might enjoy a nap. The light of Aetherius is sustaining. It feeds the spirit. On Nin, you have to eat food to restore stamina and sleep to restore health. In survival mode, anyway. In Sovengard, the environment itself is a restorative potion. You are soaking in the energies that created the universe. There is also an obscure connection to the far shores of the Redguard faith. The Redguards believe that to reach the afterlife, they must cross the stars to the far shores to avoid the hunger of Set, their version of Lorcan Alduin. The visual similarity between the far shores, as seen in the Elder Scrolls Online, and Sovngarde is striking. Both are realms of Aetherius. Both require a perilous journey past a trap. It suggests that all these different cultural afterlives might just be different neighborhoods in the same cosmic city. The Nords got the Forest District, the Redguards got the Desert Oasis District, but let's talk about the atmosphere in a literal sense. The statues in the garden, those massive, hooded figures weeping into bowls, are silhouetted against this kaleidoscope sky. Who are they? They aren't sure. They don't look like Ysgramor. Some lore suggests they are the Old Olnefi, the ancestors who mourn the loss of their divinity when the world was created. They are crying because they are stuck in the process of creation. They are the sad counterpoint to the happy warriors inside. They remind us that this beautiful sky came at a terrible price. The war of Manifest Mesphors, the shattering of time, the death of Lorcan, all of that trauma is painted across the ceiling of the world. The sky also acts as a navigational aid. The Whale constellation is often directly above the bridge, the Whalebone Bridge, remember? The Warrer hangs over the hall. The Thief is, well, usually hiding behind a nebula. The geography of the realm mirrors the geography of the stars. It implies that Sovengard is the true reality, and the constellations we see on Nirn are just the shadows cast by this place. And consider the Call of Valor shout again. When you use it on Nirn to summon a hero from Sovengard, they arrive in a flash of this specific purple-gold light. They are temporarily dragging the atmosphere of Aetherius down to Tamriel, that's why they glow. They are radioactive with the energy of their home. For the player, stepping out and looking at this sky provides a moment of profound peace. The music shifts here, the chanting fades, replaced by ethereal, synthesized tones. It creates a sense of the end. You have climbed the highest mountain, entered the portal, and walked the spirit path. You have gone as far as a map can take you. You are at the edge of the canvas, but as beautiful as the light of creation is, you can't eat starlight. A Nord warrior needs something more substantial than cosmic radiation to feel truly at home. The spirit is fed by the sky, but the memory of the body craves the comforts of the air. The eyes have feasted enough. It is time for the stomach to have its turn. Let's head back inside. The roast is done, the mead is poured, and I promise you, the catering in the afterlife is absolutely to die for. Pushing back through the heavy doors, leaving the silent majesty of the ethereal sky behind, we return to the noise and the heat. The transition is abrupt. One moment, you are contemplating the mathematical structure of the universe. The next, you are dodging a flying chicken leg and a very enthusiastic embrace from a guy named Rogare. We are back in the heart of the hall, and now we focus on the engine that keeps this party running. The menu. This is the 12th fact of Sovngarde, and the one that brings the most comfort to the common Nord, the feast that never ends. In most religions, the afterlife is depicted as a state of spiritual bliss, playing harps on clouds, becoming one with the cosmos, or reincarnating into a butterfly. These are all very nice, abstract concepts. But the Nords are a pragmatic people. They know that bliss is hard to quantify, but a belly full of warm meat and a head full of good mead, that is a happiness you can measure by the tankard. The Hall of Valor is not just a warrior's lounge. It is a metaphysical banquet that caters to the memory of hunger. The sensory details here are overwhelming in the best possible way. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, roasted garlic, and caramelized fat. It's the smell of a tavern on a winter's night, amplified to divine proportions. In the center of the hall, massive spits turn slowly over the fire. And here is the core in-game fact that players often sprint past. The food never runs out. You see the roasted ox heads on the tables. You see the legs of goat, the wheels of cheese, the bowls of apple cabbage stew. In the game, you can pick these items up. You can eat them, and if you wait for the cell to reset, or simply look away for a simulated eternity, they are replenished. The spits are always turning. The kegs are always pouring. It is an infinite loop of sustenance. This isn't just a gameplay mechanic, it is the theological bedrock of the realm. In the mortal world, resources are scarce. You have to hunt the deer, skin it, preserve the meat, and hope it lasts through the winter. Hunger is the constant companion of the Skyrim citizen. But in Sovngarde, scarcity has been abolished. This infinite roast is a direct parallel to the Sæhrímnir of Norse mythology, the boar that is killed and eaten every day, only to be resurrected the next morning. In Sovengard, the ox serves the same purpose. It represents the conquest of death over entropy. On Nirn, if you eat a steak, the steak is gone. In Sovengard, the act of consumption does not destroy the object, it celebrates it. The ox is honoured to be eaten, and the warrior is honoured to eat it. It's a symbiotic cycle of feasting without the grim reality of slaughter. But let's talk about the beverages. The mead in Sovngarde isn't your watered-down Blackbriar swill, or that honey-heavy Honning brew stuff. This is the nectar of the gods. The bottles you find here are simply labelled mead, but their effects are potent. In the game mechanics, they restore stamina and health. In the lore, this liquid is likely distilled from the waters of Aetherius itself, flavoured with the memory of honey. This leads to a delightful piece of obscure lore regarding the consequences of drinking in the afterlife. We know that Nords love to get drunk. It's a cultural pastime. But getting drunk on Nirn comes with hangovers, liver failure, and bad decisions involving giants. In Sovngarde, however, the negative effects of alcohol seem to be removed. You get the warmth, the loosening of the tongue, the bravery, and the camaraderie, but you never get the headache, you never get sick. It is intoxication without toxicity. It is intoxication without toxicity. It is the perfect buzz, sustained for eternity. This is why the hero is always so jolly. They are perpetually at that sweet spot of 3 drinks in, where everyone is your best friend and every song is the best song you've ever heard. There is a fascinating community debate, often called the latrine theory, that stems from this feast. It's a bit crude, but it's a valid question for world building. If thousands of Nords are eating and drinking non-stop for eternity, where does it all go? There are no bathrooms in the Hall of Valor. The prevailing theory, which saves the dignity of the afterlife, is that the food in Sovngarde is not matter in the physical sense. It is spirit matter. When a soul eats a spirit's wheat roll, the essence of the sweet roll merges with the essence of the soul. It is 100% efficient energy conversion. There is no waste because the food is burned up completely by the fire of the spirit. You aren't filling a stomach, you are filling a desire. The act of chewing and swallowing is a psychosomatic ritual that comforts the soul, reminding it of the pleasures of being alive without the biological necessity of digestion. This concept of comfort is crucial. Why do dead people need to eat? They don't have cells to nourish. They eat because eating is social. The Hall of Valor is designed to foster community. You can't really bond with someone while floating in a void of pure light, but break bread with them, share a rid, clink mugs, that creates a bond. The feast is the mechanism that turns a collection of individual heroes into a band of brothers. It anchors them. We should also note the variety of food. It's strictly Nordic fare. You won't find sweet rolls from Cyrodiil or scrib jelly from Morrowind here. It's potatoes, leeks, venison, beef, and bread. This reinforces the nationalist nature of the realm. It is a paradise built on the specific tastes of the Nords. To a wood elf who follows the Green Pact and only eats meat, the vegetable soup would be offensive. To a high elf, the lack of wine would be barbaric. But to a Nord, this rustic spread is the height of luxury. It validates their culture. It says you were right to like turnips. Turnips are divine. There is a subtle tragedy in the feast as well. If you look closely at the tables, you'll see empty spots, plates that are full but untouched. These represent the warriors who are currently out fighting, or perhaps the friends who haven't arrived yet. The feast is always ready, waiting for the guest list to fill up. It adds a layer of anticipation to the meal. Every time the door opens, heads turn. Is it Ragnar? Did he finally die? The feast is a welcome party that never ends. The serving vessels themselves are worth a look. They are made of gold and silver, heavy and ornate, have gold and ornate. In life, most of these warriors probably ate off wooden trenchers or pewter plates. Here, they eat like kings. This elevation of status is part of the reward. In Sovengard, every foot soldier is a jarl. Every farm boy who died defending his homestead is treated with the same culinary respect as Ysgramor himself. The hierarchy of wealth is gone, replaced by the hierarchy of appetite. And let's be honest, the Dragonborn taking part in this feast is a funny image. You can sit down, if the game lets you, and grab a tankard. You are stealing the ambrosia of the dead. Does it taste different to you? Does it taste older? The game doesn't give us a text box for flavour, but we can imagine that the mead of Sovngarde tastes like nostalgia. It tastes like the first warm day of spring after a harsh winter. The soundscape of the feast is also important. It's not a polite dinner party. It's a riot. There is shouting, singing, and the banging of tables. This auditory chaos is a comfort to Nords who are used to the noise of battle and the noise of the tavern. Silence is suspicious to a Nord. Silence means an ambush. The constant noise of the hall is a signal of safety. It means you can let your guard down. You don't have to listen for footsteps in the snow anymore. One specific detail that often goes unnoticed is the size of the portions. They are comically large. The cheese wheels are the size of shields. The ribs look like they came from a mammoth, not a cow. This giantism of the food reflects the larger-than-life nature of the residents. Everything in Sovngarde is scaled up. The emotions are bigger, the stories are taller, and the lunch is heavier. As we pan across the room, watching the heroes gorge themselves on this eternal banquet, we realize that this is the fuel for the final battle. They aren't just eating for pleasure, they are carb-loading for the end of the world. They know that eventually the horn will blow, and they will have to march out to face Alduin or some other cosmic threat. The feast is the preparation. It builds the spiritual bulk they need to wrestle with dragons. But not everyone in the hall is participating in the raucous toasts. Not everyone is banging their mug on the table and demanding another leg of goat. In a quieter corner, perhaps near the fire but away from the main thoroughfare, sits a figure who represents a completely different kind of strength. He isn't eating, he is meditating, he isn't shouting, he is silent. He is the man who proved that the loudest voice is the one that doesn't need to speak at all. He is the calm in the centre of the storm, and his presence here is the ultimate vindication of a philosophy that many Nords mock, but Shor clearly respects. Let's put down our tankards, wipe the grease from our chins, and approach the master of the silence. Let's meet Jurgen Windcaller. If you push through the throng of rowdy shield-biters and navigate around the tables where arm-wrestling matches are shaking the floorboards, you might stumble upon a quiet alcove near the hearth. Here, the noise of the feast seems to dampen, absorbed by an aura of profound stillness. Sitting there, not drinking, not shouting, and looking like the calm eye of a hurricane, is an older man in grey robes. This is Jurgen Windcaller. His presence here is the 13th fact, and it serves as the ultimate theological mic drop for anyone who thinks the Nordic afterlife is just for mindless barbarians. Jurgen Windcaller proves that in the eyes of Shor, the strength to withhold a blow is just as valuable as the strength to strike one. The core in-game fact is jarring for many players who spent the first half of the main quest getting lectured by Arngir about how shouting is for worship, not for killing bandits. You expect the founder of the Greybeards to be somewhere else, maybe floating in a cloud of pure pacifism or meditating on a mountaintop in the sky. But no, he is right here in the mead hall, rubbing elbows with Gormlaith, the dragon slayer. This confirms that the way of the voice, the philosophy of pacifism, is a valid ticket to Valhalla. But let's really look at the man. Jurgen isn't just a monk, he is a retired warlord. Before he was the Windcaller, he was a general. The obscure lore backstory here is vital to understanding why he gets the VIP treatment. In the early First Era, after the Dragon War, the Nords tried to conquer Morrowind. They thought, we have the voice we can't lose. They marched to Red Mountain, shouted at the Chimer and the Dwemer, and they got absolutely wrecked. The Nords were humiliated. Most generals would blame the terrain or the supply lines or the dice rolls. Jurgen blamed the theology. He went into seclusion for 7 years to meditate on why the gods allowed them to fail. His conclusion was radical. The voice failed them because they were using it for petty conquest instead of the worship of Kine. The gods didn't supply the ammo because the war was unjust. This realization birthed the way of the voice. Now, here is the legendary feat that earned him his seat, often cited as the shouting match. When Jurgen came back down from the mountain to preach peace, the other Nord tongues, the battle shouters, were furious. They challenged him. Lore states that 17 tongues shouted at him simultaneously for 3 days. They threw every offensive shout in the book at him: fire breath, frost breath, unrelenting force. And Jurgen he swallowed the shouts. He didn't fight back, he just stood there, unmovable, until they exhausted themselves. That is why he is in the Hall of Valor. He didn't get in because he was nice. He got in because he was arguably the strongest tank in history. To stand still while 17 demigods scream at you requires a level of fortitude that makes fighting a dragon look like a light warm-up. His pacifism wasn't weakness, it was a flex. It was the ultimate display of dominance. I am so strong that I don't need to hurt you to win. This sparks a massive debate within the fan community known as the Greybeard hypocrisy. Players often get frustrated with the Greybeards for refusing to help in the Civil War or against Alduin. Initially, they seem useless. But seeing Jurgen in Sovengard reframes their entire order. The Greybeards aren't useless. They are dangerous men, keeping a lid on a nuclear reactor. Jurgen represents the safety catch on the weapon of the voice. His presence in the hall suggests that Shor appreciates the safety catch just as much as the trigger. When you speak to him, Jurgen is surprisingly validating. He doesn't scold the Dragonborn. He doesn't say, "You shouldn't be using Dragonrend." He recognizes that the Dragonborn is an exception to the rule. The Dragonborn appears at the turning of the age, he muses. He understands the concept of true need. The way of the voice allows for violence only in times of true need. Stopping the World Eater from eating the afterlife? That definitely counts. Jurgen isn't a dogmatist here, he is a pragmatist who knows when to break his own rules. Visually, his robes stand out in a sea of plate and mail. It's a deliberate design choice. It reminds us that the power of the Nord is not in the steel, but in the spirit or the breath. Everyone else in the room is wearing their strength on the outside. Jurgen keeps his on the inside. He is the guy at the gym who looks like a librarian but can deadlift the squat rack without breaking sweat. There is also a fascinating implication regarding the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller. We spent a good chunk of the early game retrieving that horn from his tomb in Ustengrav. We returned it to the Greybeard so they could acknowledge us. But here in Sovengard, does he have the horn? Or is the horn just a physical relic left on Nirn? It connects to the idea of relics in the Elder Scrolls. The item retains a connection to the soul. By handling his horn, the Dragonborn essentially introduced themselves to Jurgen before they even met. You shook hands with his ghost in the tomb, and now you're meeting the man in the mansion. We should also touch on the relationship between Jurgen and Paarthurnax. Jurgen was likely the first human to really listen to Paarthurnax after the Dragon War. They probably spent decades sitting on the throat of the world, just breathing at each other. Jurgen is the human bridge to the dragon philosophy. While Gormlaith and Hakon hate dragons, Jurgen understands them. He understands that the voice is their nature. His presence in the hall provides a necessary counterbalance to the anti-dragon racism of the other heroes. He brings nuance to the dinner table. Imagine the conversations at that table. Imagine the conversations at that table. Gormlaith slams her mug down and yells, "We should have killed them all." And Jurgen just quietly sips his mead and says, "But did you ask why they were burning the village, Gormlaith?" He is the designated buzzkill, but in a way that elevates the conversation. He forces the other heroes to think. Furthermore, Jurgen's section of the hall represents the intellectual side of the Nord culture. We often stereotype Nords as hit first, ask questions never. But Jurgen was a philosopher. He wrote treatises, metaphorically speaking, or maybe literally on stone tablets. He changed the entire course of Nord history with an idea. He proves that you can be a Nord hero by using your brain. You don't have to be a barbarian. You can be a scholar, a monk, a thinker. and still end up in the VIP section of the afterlife. There is a subtle sadness to him, though. The Greybeards, his legacy, are dwindling. There are only 4 left on the mountain. His philosophy is dying out, replaced by the clamour of war and the worship of Talos, a conqueror. Jurgen sits in the Hall of Valor, watching his people forget the lessons he taught them. He watches them make the same mistakes, using the voice for war, for power, for politics. And yet he doesn't intervene. He adheres to the non-interventionist policy even in death. He trusts that the cycle will correct itself. He trusts in the true need. His interaction with the Dragonborn is the passing of the torch. He realizes that the Greybeards cannot save the world. They aren't meant to. You are. He gives you his silent blessing. It's a nod from one master of the voice to another. I taught them how to hold it in, he seems to say. Now you show them when to let it out. As we stand near Jurgen, basking in his aura of calm, we notice something else about the crowd in the hall. We see kings, we see warriors, we see a pacifist monk. It's a diverse group, but if you look closely, and if you know your lore, you start to realize who is missing. There are some very famous names in Nord history that are nowhere to be found. Great warriors, legendary kings. Where are they? Why aren't they here eating roast ox? This brings us to the darker side of the afterlife sorting system. Sovngarde is the goal, but it is not the guarantee. There are other claimants for the souls of the Nords. There are poachers in the night. Let's leave the warmth of Jurgen's alcove and talk about the empty chairs. Let's talk about the heroes who didn't make the cut. Not because they were weak, but because they made deals with things that don't share. As you scan the faces in the Hall of Valor, enjoying the camaraderie and the endless mead, a thought begins to nag at the back of your mind. You see Gormlaith, you see Ysgramor, you see Ysgramor, you see Jorgmor. But if you know your history, or if you've spent enough time reading the books in the Arcanime, you start to realize that the guest list is incomplete. There are legends missing. There are heroes whose names are sung in every tavern in Skyrim. Yet their chairs in Shor's Hall are in every tavern in Skyrim. Yet their chairs in Shor's Hall are empty. This brings us to the 14th fact, and the sobering reality of the Nordic spiritual economy, the absence of the unworthy, and more specifically, the absence of the claimed. Sovngarde is the default destination for the brave, but it is not an inescapable gravity. It is possible to be a great warrior, to die with a sword in your hand, and still miss the pot because you signed your name on the wrong dotted line. The most glaring example of this, and a core in-game fact that drives one of the major guild quest lines, is the fate of the Companions. The Companions are the spiritual successors of Ysgramor. They live in Jorvaskra, a hall built from the hull of Ysgramor's own ship. You would expect every harbinger of the Companions to be sitting at the head table in the Hall of Valor, swapping stories with the founder, but they aren't there. Why? Because of the beast blood. For centuries, the inner circle of the Companions has carried the curse or gift of lycanthropy. They are werewolves. And according to cosmic law, a soul tainted by the beast blood does not go to Sovngarde. It goes to Hircine's hunting grounds. This is the tragedy of Kodlak Whitemane. When we meet him in the game, he is terrified. He is an old man, a warrior of impeccable honor, who has led the Companions with wisdom. He deserves Sovngarde, but he knows that when he dies, Hircine, the Daedric prince of the hunt, will claim him. He describes it as an eternity of running, hunting, and killing in a savage, endless forest. For a true Nord who wants the warmth of the hall and the company of his ancestors, the hunting grounds are a hellscape. Kodlak's absence in the Hall of Valor, until you potentially cure him post-mortem, serves as a stark warning. The eternal promise of Sovngarde has fine print. You cannot serve 2 masters. You cannot pledge your soul to a Daedric prince for power in life and then expect Shor to welcome you in death. The Daedra are possessive. Hircine doesn't care if you are a good person. He cares that you have his stamp on your soul. This extends beyond the Companions. Think about the Nightingales, the elite inner circle of the Thieves' Guild. They pledge their souls to Nocturnal to guard the Twilight Sepulchre. When they die, they become shadows in the Evergloam. They don't get the roast ox. They get to become part of the literal darkness. Even if a Nightingale died bravely fighting a dragon, their prior contract with Nocturnal takes precedence. This leads to the massive, headache-inducing, soul claim debate that rages in the fan community. The Dragonborn is the ultimate example of this problem. Over the course of the game, the player can become the listener for the Night Mother, Sithis, a nightingale, Nocturnal, a champion of Molag Bal, a champion of Hermaeus Mora, and a werewolf, Hircine. You pledge your soul to about 6 different entities. So, who gets you when you die? Is there a custody battle? Does Akatosh, who owns your dragon soul, pull rank? Does Shor claim you by right of culture, or does Hircine drag you off because you forgot to kill your lycanthropy? The absence of these claimed heroes in the hall suggests that these contracts are binding. It implies that the Daedric princes are akin to predatory lenders. They offer power, the strength of the wolf, the luck of the shadow, but the interest rate is your eternity. The Hall of Valor is strictly a Shor eternity. The Hall of Valor is strictly a Shor exclusive club. No guests allowed who are wearing another god's jersey. We also have to consider the Soul Cairn. This is the destination for souls that have been soul-trapped in black soul gems. It is a bleak, purple purgatory of lightning and misery, ruled by the ideal masters. We meet legitimate heroes in there, guys who just had the bad luck of fighting a necromancer who knew the soul trap spell. This is perhaps the most terrifying fate of all because it overrides everything. You could be the greatest Nord who ever lived, a paragon of virtue. But if a 2-bit wizard casts Soul Trap on you before stabbing you, you don't go to Sovngarde, you go to the Cairn. This creates a terrifying fragility to the Nordic afterlife. It's not just about how you lived, it's about the specific mechanics of your death. It explains the deep cultural hatred Nords have for magic, specifically necromancy. It's not just superstition, it's an existential threat. A necromancer doesn't just kill you, they deny you your heaven, they steal your eternity. There is also the matter of the unworthy, in the traditional sense the cowards. We don't see them in the hall, and we don't see them in the mist, unless they are lost souls trying to find the way. Where do they go? Some lore suggests they simply go to the Dreamsleeve, the recycling center of the universe, where their memories are wiped and their energy is reused for a new life. To a Nord, this is a form of death. The I ceases to exist. Only in Sovengard is the personality preserved. This absence creates a survivor bias in the hall. Everyone here is a winner. Everyone here is a badass. It creates an echo chamber of valor. You don't hear the stories of the guys who ran away. You don't hear the regrets of the people who sold out. You only hear the glory. This makes the hall an incredibly inspiring but also somewhat intense place to be. There is no mediocrity here. It's also worth noting the absence of the Ebony Warrior. We killed him, presumably before coming here. He wanted to go to Sovengard. Did he make it? We don't see him. Maybe he's still fighting Tsun on the bridge. Or maybe, as a Red Guard, his soul naturally drifted to the far shores despite his wishes. It raises the question of whether you can convert to an afterlife. Can a wood elf who worships Shor get in? We don't see any elves in the hall. It seems that cultural and racial metaphysics play a strong role in the sorting process. Visually, the hall is spacious. There is room for more. This emptiness implies that the standards are high. Not every soldier makes it. Not every Jarl makes it. Not every Jarl makes it. It forces the player to look at their own character. If you died right now, where would you go? Would you be sitting next to Ysgramor? Or would you be hunting with Hircine? Or worse, would you be a battery for the ideal masters? The empty chairs serve as a silent memorial to those who almost made it. The friends who died of disease, which doesn't count as a valiant death. The warriors who were tricked by Daedra. The heroes who are soul-trapped. The Hall of Valor is a place of joy, but the spaces between the heroes are filled with the ghosts of the unfortunate. But for those who are here, the journey isn't necessarily over. We tend to think of the afterlife as the end of the story, and they lived happily ever after, dead. But in the Nordic worldview, time is a wheel. The end is just a prelude to a new beginning. The warriors in the hall aren't just feasting to pass the time, they are waiting. They are a reserve army. The 15th and final fact about Sovengard is that it is not a parking lot, it is a barracks, and the door swings both ways. As we stand at the threshold of the hall, watching the firelight dance on the faces of the fallen, we arrive at the final cyclical truth of the Nordic afterlife. It is a truth that turns the concept of rest in peace on its head. In most beliefs, the afterlife is a permanent destination, a period at the end of a sentence. But for the Nords, Sovngarde is merely a comma. It is a pause for breath before the next scream of battle. This is the 15th fact, the cycle of return. The souls here are not retired, they are in reserve. The core in-game mechanic that proves this is the shout you receive from Tsun as a parting gift, Hall of Valor. This isn't just a fancy summoning spell like a conjuration wizard uses to pull a Daedra out of oblivion. Those spells compel a spirit against its will, or construct a facsimile out of chaotic creatia. The Call of Valor is an invitation. When you shout Hun Kael Zor, Eerie Champion Legend, on the snowy slopes of Skyrim, you are literally opening a micro-portal to the Hall of Valor. And what happens? A hero answers. Gormlaith, Felldir, or Hakon steps out of the golden light and into the mud and blood of Tamriel. They fight for you. They bleed, spiritually speaking. And when the battle is done, they fade back to Aetherius. This confirms that the door to Sovengard swings both ways. The heroes are not trapped here. They are waiting for the call. They are eager to intervene in the affairs of the living when the need is dire. This interaction bridges the gap between the ancestors and the descendants, proving that the line between the dead and the living is much thinner than the Imperials would like to admit. But this mechanic hints at a much grander, more terrifying piece of obscure lore, the Kalpic cycle. The ancient Nords do not view time as a straight line. They view it as a cycle. The world begins, the world exists, the world ends, and the world begins again. This is the Kalpa. Alduin's role in the grand cosmic order is not to be a villain, but to be the janitor. He is the world eater because, eventually, the world becomes too cluttered, too corrupt, and too stagnant. It needs to be eaten so it can be digested and reborn. The warriors in Sovengard are the army for the Twilight of the Gods. They are the Einherjar of the Elder Scrolls universe. They are feasting to build their strength not just for a wrestling match, but for the end of the Kalpa. When Alduin finally succeeds, and lore suggests that eventually he must succeed for the cycle to continue, the souls in Sovngarde likely have a role to play in the dawn of the next world. They are the seeds of the next reality. They carry the memory of humanity into the next dream. This perspective changes the vibe of the hall completely. It's not a retirement home, it's an ark. It is the repository of the Nordic spirit, kept safe in Aetherius while the physical world goes through its messy cycles of empire and ruin. This leads to a fascinating fan theory regarding the Shezarrine and reincarnation. We know that certain souls seems to pop up again and again in history heroes who look like Sæhrímnir, who act like Pelennor, who shout like the Dragonborn. Are these new souls, or are they old souls returning from Sovngarde? The theory suggests that the most powerful spirits in the hall don't just visit, they reincarnate. When the world faces an existential threat, Shor might look at a soul like Sæhrímnir or Riemann and say, "Suit up, you're going back in." The memory is wiped, the skills are reset to level 1, but the spark remains. If this is true, then the Dragonborn themselves might be a returning soul. You might have sat at this table before. You might have carved your name in this wood in a previous life. The feeling of homecoming you experience in Sovengard might be literal déjà vu. As the Dragonborn prepares to leave, the atmosphere in the hall shifts. The heroes raise their caps. They don't say goodbye. They say until next time. They know you. They know that your thread is woven into the same tapestry as theirs. Whether you return in 60 years as an old warrior who died in bed, or in 6 minutes because you slipped off the mountain, you will be back. The hall is the constant. Life is just the excursion. The conversation with Tsun at the portal is the final seal on this promise. When your life cycle is complete, we will welcome you, he says. It is a guarantee. You have pre-booked your ticket. You have pre-booked your ticket. You have passed the test while alive, so the test when you die is a mere formality. You have the VIP pass for eternity. But there is a melancholy to the departure. Stepping away from the warmth, the light, and the song is physically painful. You have tasted perfection. You have felt the absence of pain. And now you have to go back to a world of cold winds, political squabbles, aches, pains, and taxes. You have to go back to being mortal. Tsun shouts you back. The world dissolves in white light. The song of the hall fades into the distance, replaced by the howling wind of the throat of the world. You're standing on the snow, alone. The dragons are circling overhead, mourning or celebrating Alduin's defeat. The sky is just a sky again. The stars are distant and cold. But something has changed. You aren't just a warrior anymore. You are a witness. You carry the secret of the hall in your heart. You know that the darkness of death is a lie. You know that the mist can be cleared. You know that behind the veil of the world there is a fire that never goes out, a feast that never ends, and a family that is waiting for you to come home. The cycle continues. You will live, you will fight, you will age. But you will never fear the end again, because for a Nord, the end is just the moment the bouncer opens the velvet rope and lets you into the real party. The Hall of Valor stands eternal, anchored in the magic of Aetherius, guarded by the gods and fueled by the bravery of the fallen. It is the dream that wakes the warrior. It is the golden promise that makes the freezing tundra bearable. And as long as there is one Nord left to swing an axe and shout at the sky, the hall will never be empty. Now, let the roar of the fire fade. Let the booming songs of the ancient heroes drift into a soft, distant hum. The golden light of the hall dims, turning into the warm orange glow of dying embers in a half. Take a deep breath. Can you feel the chill of the mist lifting? Can you feel the weight of your armor? The weight of your day sliding off your shoulders? You have walked the path of the dead and returned unscathed. You have crossed the Whalebone Bridge, braved the fog of the World Eater, and shared a drink with legends. But the journey is over for now. The portal is closed. The dragons have returned to their mountain tops, and the Draugr have returned to their sleep. The world of Skyrim is quiet. The wind howling outside your window is just the wind. It cannot hurt you. It is just the breath of Kine, watching over the land. Close your eyes. Picture that great hall one last time. Not the noise, but the warmth, the safety, the feeling of being exactly where you are meant to be. There are no tests here. There are no gatekeepers demanding to know your worth. You are safe. You are rested. The story is told. The lore is recorded. The ancestors are watching, but they are patient. They will wait. There is no rush to join them. For now, your place is here, in the soft quiet of the night, drifting slowly down the river of dreams. Sleep well, traveller. The hall will be there when you wake, or whenever you need to remember that the dark is never absolute. Sweet dreams.